we are going to open this special meeting for June the 25th, 2020 at 5:19 p.m. is what I am showing on my clock.
That's right.
And so, Josh, can you start us with the Pledge of Allegiance? That would be wonderful. Oh, wait, hold on, Josh. Let me get my flag.
Yeah.
I bought us a flag, okay?
You
All right.
ready?
Here we go.
All right.
I pledge allegiance
to the
to the
flag
flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That has to be a placemaker every single time because we need to be reminded. All right, brings us to oral communications. If this is your first time on this platform or at a board meeting, this is an opportunity for you to address the board on a topic that is not on our agenda. If you have something that you would like to say to the board, can you raise your hand, write it in the chat, and Dr. Itoko will unmute you.
There is an intent from Jennifer Conway.
All right. Miss Jennifer, you're on.
Oh, trying to start my video. Okay. Hi there. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
I sent an email, I think it was yesterday, with some thoughts, and I just thought I would share that here in this meeting. And I know you won't be able to respond to me, but first of all, I am really, really excited to see Tuesday's meeting get calendarized. I cannot wait for that joint board study session. I think it's a huge step towards unification happening, and I'm really excited. As we get ready for that, and I know Willow Creek Board is having a meeting this Sunday, I sent the letter to them as well. Would love to ask that we really work hard to promote these meetings really broadly, that we notice them early, and we do things like Nextdoor posts, Facebook posts, do text and emails to both of our school communities about them, and any other ideas that folks have and how to really inclusively let people know that these meetings are happening. And then as far as like the capture and record and streaming, that we look, like Zoom meetings are great because they do eventually get put up, and thank you to Dr. Garcia and Mr. Ayala for posting some of the past meetings so I could catch up from last week. But if we put these on Facebook, do Facebook Live, they're not only available right there in the moment on those channels, but they're also easily archived. So you don't have to like download them and upload them later. I know that can be painful because of files, especially when you guys go till midnight, which is all too frequent, I know. That makes for a super large file, and the processing takes a long time. So I wanted to just ask that we all just work a little harder at that noticing and the streaming, and I am available to help set that up, test it out, like do anything I can to help make that a possibility. So.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you. Is there someone else, Dr. Itoko?
I see no other raised hands.
All right. Going once, twice. All right, 4.01, the bond survey update. Dr. Garcia.
Yes, I'm gonna invite our friends from CFW to give an update to the full board regarding the bond survey.
Good evening. My name is Emilio Flores. I'm with CFW. I'm joined today by Bella Guillen and Michael as well. Let's see if I can share the presentation. Wonderful.
And just so you know, to the fellow board members, we went through this at the facilities committee meeting. So Ida and I likely don't have as many questions as you may have because we've already been through it once.
I've been told to be slightly more brief this time around, but I will try to convey as the same amount of information that we did in that meeting as well.
You were pretty brief. You said 18 minutes, and it only took you 22. So
Just, you know.
I'd say take the time you need to cover it because it's really important information.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, pursuant to the board's direction, we did go and conduct a survey of registered voters in the district. There we go. Overall, we were able to conduct 324 interviews, 26 via cell phone, 112 via landline, 186 online through an online survey. The poll occurred between June 7th and June 13th, resulting in an overall margin of error for the results you'll see of about 5.35%. For those folks that may not be familiar with surveys, the margin of error can go either plus or minus. So for the numbers you see here, what we recommend is take the most pessimistic view, which is subtract 5% from everything that you see. And I'll give you the most pessimistic sample in terms of overall responses. The average interview, in terms of the call lengths, were 18 minutes. We did not keep a timer on the online responses. Those were probably a little briefer, just for the fact that the people could read at their own pace. One interesting comment about this particular poll is that we did have a good amount of phone responses. Over the years, the amount of people responding by phone has declined as caller ID has become more sophisticated. I think everybody being home to one form or another gave folks an incentive to talk to somebody else besides their family members. So I think the overall response rate was good. Overall, we're pretty pleased with the response from the community. Overall, these are the demographic characteristics of the respondents, 324 folks that responded. Overall, the female-male ratio is about where is pretty representative of the district's registered voters as a whole. In terms of party affiliation, we are a little undersampled on folks who identify or self-identify as Republican, and therefore we're also slightly overrepresentative of folks that self-identify as Democratic voters. Parental status, I want to point that out. That is an important thing I think for the board and for the community as a whole to look at. Of all the folks that we talked to, 34% of them identify themselves as being not a parent. That means either a former parent, a future parent, or a current parent. And that's fairly common. Sometimes we get so caught up in the idea that, the schools are to us, are the center of the community. Everybody knows what's going on. But the reality of the situation is a lot of people do not interact with your schools on a day-to-day basis and may not necessarily know of the comings and goings or the events that occur. Obviously, this district in particular has had some attention overall, but even that, with that said, there are folks that are not necessarily engaging with the school district on a day-to-day basis. In terms of ethnicity and race, we are undersampled a bit in terms of Hispanic, Asian, and African American respondents. Part of that may just be the fact that we may not have up-to-date voter data for those folks, and quite frankly, they may not be as readily available as some of the other folks we have. In terms of age, there's no surprise here either. Respondents who tend to be younger, folks that are younger tend not to respond at the same rate. Those folks that either of an older age bracket. Once again, that's in part due to technology and just the overall tendency to talk to folks, strangers, if you will, via phone or give out their opinion. They're able to do it on Twitter and Instagram and elsewhere, but oddly enough, surveys are one of those things where they're a little more suspicious about what the data is being used for and so forth. Otherwise, from 35 to 65 plus, it's pretty representative of the overall voting or demographic characteristics in terms of age for registered voters in the district. So the first thing we asked folks was, whether or not they had an intent to vote in November 2020. If they answer this question yes or no, they're able to continue. What is interesting is all 324 respondents indicated a desire to vote in the upcoming election in November. So I think overall we have a good universe of folks that will be likely voters in the fall. We wanted to ask right off the bat, the effect, or try to gain some type of knowledge regarding the effect of COVID-19, especially as pertains to folks who may have had some harm financially due to COVID-19. 69% of respondents indicated there was some impact financially from the COVID-19 pandemic. That's not surprising. We went through a similar process back in 2008, 2009, 2010 during the Great Recession. That's another area which we went and thought it was important to ask folks regarding the financial impact of the current economic situation. It's a good number to keep in mind. In fact, it just in terms of 69% of folks who are answering these questions have had some type of impact on them. We then asked, so how these surveys are generally structured is that we start off with asking general questions about the community, the school district, to get an overall idea of what are the overall general perceptions. So in this particular case, we asked about the overall community, do you think the community is going in the right direction, the wrong direction, a little bit of both, don't know. As we mentioned at the facilities meeting the other day, June 7th through, I believe it's the 13th, was kind of a mixture of events happening across the United States. And so I think there was a little more concern, if you will, just about pretty much everything: the economy, the virus, racial tensions, all those types of things. And so it's kind of interesting to see this feedback from that period of time. But overall, those who responded, 43% believed that the community overall was going in the right direction. 12% said the wrong direction. 30% said a little bit of both, and 15% said, I don't really know, or I don't care to state. Zeroing in on the school district in particular, we gave them some context about the school district and asked them whether or not they believe the district is heading in the right direction, the wrong direction, a little bit of both, or don't know. 37% believe that the district is heading in the right direction. 16% believe it's heading in the wrong direction. 15% said a little bit of both, and 33% responded with not knowing. What I would remind folks of is when we go back to the parental status of respondents, there was 34% of folks who said they were non-parents. And the don't know here is 33%. I can't tell you that this person and this person exactly line up, but that is pretty typical in terms of given the fact that you have 34% of people that may not engage with the district on a day-to-day basis or even tangentially, that the don't know there is somewhat representative of that percentage. Overall, those folks who did respond, once again, 52% of them believe that the district provides a fair, good, or excellent quality of education. 6% saying excellent, 22% saying good, and 24% saying fair. Once again, we do see that 37% of folks who just don't know. And once again, in our experience, those are those folks that may not necessarily have students in the system or necessarily are engaged on an active basis with it. Only 12% of respondents believe that it was poor regarding the overall quality of education. So before we go into specific projects or talk about specific goals regarding a potential bond program, what we like to do is to ask the respondents cold if they were just sent a ballot and it had this one question on it, how would they respond? No further information. So you're seeing these results the same way that these respondents are seeing it. There's been no additional information given to them. They've been asked what their attitudes about the community are. They've been asked what their community attitude about the district is, and they've been asked whether or not they've been financially harmed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we asked them just cold, whether or not you would support a bond measure to fund the replacement of poor classrooms, construct new and modernize existing classrooms, upgrade libraries, science labs, support facilities, make central safety and security improvements, keep schools safe, clean, and well-maintained, repair, construct, and acquire classrooms, equipment, sites, and facilities. Shall the Sausalito Marin City School District's measure authorizing $40.35 million in bonds at legal rates, levying 3 cents per 100,000 of assessed value, $2.5 million annually, while the bonds are outstanding, be approved with citizens' oversight audits and no funds for administrators and all funds spent locally. If the election were held today, would you vote yes in favor of the measure or no to oppose the measure? This ballot language was drafted along with bond counsel. It conforms to the legal requirements of the ballot language, and without any information, additional information given to respondents, 65% of folks said they would vote yes in favor, 20% said they'd vote no to oppose, and 15% said that they were undecided at this time. So overall, just in terms of looking at the overall basis support, with no additional information, 65% of respondents indicated that they would be in favor of a bond measure for the school district.
Just a reminder that if we were to go for this bond in November, it would be 50%, not 2/3, correct?
So what the district is currently contemplating is going for what's called a Proposition 39 bond election. That requires a 55% approval by the district's voters, and that's correct. That's in contrast with a Prop 46 election, which would require a 2/3 supermajority. So if an election was to be held in November, the district would be seeking 55% approval for this measure. So currently we're looking at 65%. That's a 10-point positive in favor of. But once again, if you want to look for the margin of error and be the most pessimistic you want to be, subtract 5%, and so it would be 60%. So we'd still be not necessarily biting our fingernails, but it's not a slam dunk, if you will, at 65%. It's plausible, it's feasible, but by no means is 80, 90, 95% of approval. So following that, we try to give the respondents additional information about potential projects, potential goals of the overall bond measure in greater detail. So overall, what respondents are then given is a number of objectives, if you will, or attitudes or themes regarding facilities improvements. What you see here is a summary of the following pages, and it talks about primarily what is the overall attitude towards the voter attitude towards certain projects. And what you're seeing here is the aggregate of respondents. And what I mean by that is that we ask folks, whether or not they agree. We make a statement, and we ask folks whether or not they agree or disagree with that statement, and then we ask them whether or not they somewhat agree, or mostly agree, or strongly agree, or if they somewhat disagree or strongly disagree. And what you're seeing here is the aggregate of those responses. So total agreement and total disagreement, that is what that refers to. I apologize that it sounds a little Valley Girl. I totally agree. That's not what the response was. It was either somewhat agree or it was strongly agree. Mm. So the most voters agreed that there was a need for local investment in general school improvements, and then more specifically in school improvements. They believed in equity that was essential to unification, and that both campuses needed to have improvements. That there needed to be some independence for state funding or reliance on state funding for facilities. Most of them agreed that they wanted to have the ability to secure local match for state funds. Most of the overwhelming majority of folks agreed that there needed to be some type of oversight. That is required by a Prop 39 election. So it's not something that you would necessarily have a choice in, but they did respond well to the idea of an independent bond oversight committee having some oversight. Cultivating social justice and the district trying to provide quality education were the two statements that probably had the least amount of support. And one of the rationales for that is probably because cultivating social justice or providing a quality education is a little bit more subjective in terms of you're kind of imparting your own thoughts of what that means and what have you. But overall, the statements that were made, voters tended to agree with them. The following slides, a couple slides, are those same voter attitudes and themes broken down, and you can see specific bond or specific survey language on the left-hand side, As you'll see here, in most cases, there's a high percentage of folks that say they strongly agree with statements, and a slightly lower percentage of folks that somewhat agree. The way that we look at these is that you really want to gauge the overall support level by the strongly agree. Someone is not necessarily on the fence. Someone's not necessarily being wishy-washy about things. This is your solid supporter. In terms of the somewhat agree, Superintendent Garcia mentioned to me asked me the other day, how much of those folks can we really rely on? And historically, it's probably about 50-50. So if we took the first example of the 16% that somewhat agree with the statement to the left, probably 8% of those folks, or half of those folks, so an additional 8% would agree with that statement going forward. What's interesting is on the somewhat disagree and strongly disagree folks, you got to take them at their word. And what I mean by that is that if someone's willing to tell you no, it probably means that they're a no. So the same logic does not apply to the somewhat disagree and strongly disagree folks. If they're willing to tell you no, the strongly or somewhat disagree, those folks are probably being polite, but they're a no. So those are probably real numbers in terms of, or those are likely real numbers when we talk about those who may oppose a certain statement. Once again, this is just those same types of themes that we're looking over here. As we'll notice as we go forward through these different examples, is the strongly agree tends to decrease in support level, and a lot of that has to do with either moving on from specific core improvements. So for instance, if we look at the first page, it was more about specific improvements and more tangible types of statements. As we move through these statements, what you'll see is that it becomes a little more abstract. We bring in the idea of the state, or matching funds and so forth, things that people may not necessarily be as familiar with. And as that familiarity goes away, so does the support level overall. What I do want to talk about probably on this last page is just the last two items, talking about our schools will forge a strong community of global citizens who find strength in diversity, affirm and value difference, who are prepared for college, a career, and life, which empowers all people to overcome systematic barriers, create social justice and climate justice. And the second one, the district envisions providing world-class facilities and educational programs that serve as a model of education, equity, excellence, and integration. And it's the top choice for all families in 94965. Once again, those are statements that are relatively subjective. I think for the last statement, obviously there are other schools, especially private schools in the area that folks do attend. We did not disqualify anybody who had a kid at a private school or what have you. So, there's just some additional competition in the area that I think that accounts for. For the second to last statement, once again, it's kind of subjective in terms of, what is the role of a school district. A lot of folks see education as being its primary function. I know within the education world, we often look at making sure that we educate the whole human or the whole student. But that's not necessarily what most people believe to be the primary core mission of education or of a school district. And so that's why you see some of that support level come down as well. Looking at potential projects, once again, a high level of support for the projects overall, providing 21st century learning environments, replacing outdated portables, updating utilities, updating older facilities, adding specialty classrooms, improving the gyms and library facilities, providing new pre-K and K facilities, eliminating outstanding leases, that's being able to repay or pay off the COP that's currently outstanding, safety and security upgrades, update bike paths, and expand environmental learning spaces. Once again, this aggregate of the strongly agree and somewhat or much more or somewhat more. So in this particular case, what we did is we asked the respondents, would you be more likely or less likely to support a bond if you knew monies would be spent on this type of project? And then once again, if they said they'd be more likely. We said how much would be much more likely or somewhat more. If you'd be less likely, somewhat less, or much less. So once again, we see high level support overall for the projects that were tested. Once again, I would caution everybody to of the light blue numbers. When we're adding up in your head, it's probably about half those folks that would ultimately vote in favor of those projects. And then once again, to reiterate everybody's math and arithmetic skills, the margin of error, once again, you can subtract 5% from that as well. Overall, looking at the projects as we go through them, there's not a single type of project that really fails in terms of overall support or to achieve that 55% in the overall support of these projects. Even when we get down to the bottom here, when we talk about encouraging active transportation or looking at providing outdoor learning environments, those are probably the two projects that people either may not necessarily understand or they may not necessarily look at as being essential when we take everything else in totality in terms of looking at for improvements as a whole. But overall, like I said, there's no specific project that was tested that necessarily says, absolutely, we would never support a bond if it did X. And I think that's something to take away from this particular area as well. So after we go through voter attitudes and after we go through the projects, we circle back around. We ask them, now that you've heard all this, I'm going to ask you the bond language question again. And if the election were held today, would you vote yes in favor or would you vote no to oppose the measure? So once we ask them the second time, they end up, support ends up growing by about, I believe 7 points. 6 points from 65% to 71. The no decreases from 20% to 17%, and the undecided reduces from 15% to 12%. So we do pick up some folks once they understand what is the scope of the overall project. What's important to note here is there will always be a segment of the voting population that will be philosophically against raising taxes, and that's just a common underlying factor in elections throughout the Bay Area, California, or even the country as a whole. I think the highest support level I've ever seen for a bond is like 79%, which means 20% of people still voted no on something on a bond measure. So overall, we see that support raise up or increase as more information is given. And I think more importantly, what we ask them the question is beyond that, if you knew that the measure would cost $30 a year per 100,000 assessed valuation, which is lower than market value, would you vote yes to approve or no to disapprove the measure? And we asked them if they said yes to $30, we skip to the next question. If they said no, we then asked them, how about $20? Okay, well, maybe. So yes. Okay, we go to the next question. If it's a no, okay, what about $15? And so what you see here, as one may predict, is as the proposed tax rate for the bonds decreases, support increases. But what you'll also notice is that we really don't lose many people, we don't really gain that many people from the no column as we decrease the tax rate. We actually gain more people from the don't know over that same span. So overall, as one would guess, the less costly the bond, the more support you'll get. The main takeaway here is the level of support from $30 to $15 doesn't really change. I mean, we're talking about 8 percentage points here. We're not talking about 20 or 30%. And so, under Prop 39, you are capped at $30 per 100,000 assessed value. And overall here, we're seeing 2/3 support for that tax rate. However, once again, if we subtract 5%, that's 62%, and that's well above the 55% threshold that is required. Just to keep everything fair,
Yes.
we also test a counter argument. And what we try to do with the counter argument is basically come up with the rationale that a potential organized campaign may run. And this is a little risky just because, you know, if the opposition was well funded and they wanted to run against the bond, you know, we've kind of, you know, figured out what was the argument that could be made and how much support would we lose. So in this particular case, we tested out language. Our schools are fine as they are. We're already paying for previous bond measures. Given the COVID-19 pandemic, now it's just not the right time to pass another bond. Our tax rates are too high as it is. So now that you've heard that statement, would you vote yes in favor of the measure or no to oppose? And as you can see, we do lose about 7% of support with a negative argument. And so, but even with that said, if we took the 64% minus 5% again, we'd be back at 59%. So once again, you know, at the end of the day, there's an overall level of support that is beyond the required 55%. However, an organized opposition with the right messaging can knock off, you know, 7-8 percentage points overall support given the right message. And so once again, those folks move down to the no and undecided. But we like to test that out just because, you know, not everybody's going to be in favor of it. And then given the climate we find ourselves in, folks are a little more politically engaged than they have in the past, and someone may run against them. It's good to know, you know, what types of arguments do work against the bond, but also, you know, how much support level you would have even if there was a potential campaign against. In terms of next steps, I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Abel Guillen. Just going to go over the overall next steps.
Thank you, Emilio, for the presentation. I just wanted to conclude with the fact that overall, our findings are, I think, lay out a plan for a successful bond measure. The district has a demonstrated need, and those particular projects actually resonate with the voters in particular. We believe that there's enough support to start out for the board to take the next step, which is authorizing us to prepare a resolution and work with bond counsel on a project list for the board's consideration. We hope to come back sometime next month at the superintendent's direction to present a resolution to the district and work with the ad hoc facilities committee, if that is formed at this meeting tonight, to come up with that project list. And the deadline to adopt that resolution would then be August 7th for the district to adopt and to be able to submit that to make sure it gets on the ballot for this November election. As a reminder, this November, all residents and all voters in California will be receiving an absentee ballot. So this is going to be a little bit different than previous elections, where the state is going to be, every county is going to be sending an absentee ballot to all voters in the district. So we do see that as an opportunity for us to try to engage voters over a longer period of time up through election day, as opposed to just on one day, which is November 3rd. After this, so from this period forward, the district can still engage in its due diligence process and provide informational materials to the community. After August 7th and after the board actually takes action adopting the resolution, I just want to be clear that there is no advocacy that the district can do using district funds, and it would have to use an independent campaign committee to campaign for the bond measure over there. So with that, that concludes the presentation, and just wanted to open up for any other questions that you all may have.
Yeah, I just want to add in that if we're going to form an ad hoc bond committee, which is on the agenda for tonight, that, you know, if we'll be working on the project list, but it's certainly going to involve communications with the community and input with the community as far as the project list that would be included on the bond. So it's not going to be done in a vacuum.
Absolutely. And Dr. Itoko, are there upcoming town hall meetings? And I mean, certainly we do really have to do due diligence. I was going to mention at several interims as these gentlemen were talking, that there is going to be an ad hoc committee, that discussion later in this on this agenda. But it does make sense. We absolutely want to be very transparent, because the one thing that I think I've learned over the years, people don't like taxes. And they really need to know if this is something that we need to get the buy-in if it's going to happen.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, President Green. We are, we have been engaged in sort of a year-long conversation with the community about facilities development as it relates to unification and desegregation, and our plan is to re-engage the community very closely over the month of July to inform the project list and any other recommendations that might be coming forward on multiple fronts. We have a communication plan and strategy, which we'll be getting out on Monday for that engagement calendar.
Thank you. Are there other board questions on the presentation, or you have a question, Bonnie?
I do have a question. So the ad hoc committee would not, after August 8th, would not be able to campaign, but they would still be active. What is the work of an ad hoc committee once August 8th passes, I guess is my question.
We dissolve.
I was just going to say you dissolve.
Yeah. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but the ad hoc bond committee was more just to have a committee that could respond a little more nimbly to some of the needs to get this bond measure up through resolution of our board. There's just a lot of little pieces, and approval of the community engagement process and so forth. It's not a body that's going to make decisions. The board itself has to make decisions on the final project list, but it just is a little more nimble than a standing committee to do what we need to do to get this thing through resolution. But according to Ed Code, the board, as Abel mentioned, we can't engage as a board and use district resources to campaign for this bond. So usually there's an outside group, correct me if I'm wrong, that we would consider potentially hiring in order to help us with the campaign process. But we can't do it ourselves.
That's right.
So would the ad hoc committee, Caroline, would that group be sort of coordinating the community outreach and town halls or whatever?
No, I think they engage more after we pass the resolution to initiate the campaign with the community in support of the bond.
Before the resolution is passed, we're going to be garnering community input, right?
Correct.
So, and is the ad hoc committee the group that will orchestrate that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the intent, I believe. Yeah.
And I certainly think we could talk more about it when it comes up on
Agenda.
in the agenda. Yeah, but that is a intent.
Got it. Huh.
Is there any more questions for CFW from trustees?
No, good job, I'd say.
Do you have any sense about how, I know that you're working on various things in other communities. Do you have a sense about how this relates?
So we work throughout the state of California, and as you may recall, or you may have experienced yourselves, March was a very strange election. About 33% of bond measures across the state were approved. Historically, that's usually around 75%. So about half the passage rate occurred in March. There's been a lot of speculation of why that is. Part of it may have been the fact that we had a statewide school bond on the ballot that was, not erroneously, was unfortunately named Prop 13. And so if you are of a certain age, you know Prop 13 as defined proper noun. And so anything else that's called Prop 13 is inevitably going to stir up some what's the word, feelings about it. And the other part of it too is that, March was one of those elections where a lot of people thought there'd be a huge Democratic push in terms of excitement around nominating a Democratic nominee. As we all know, the election was pretty much, I wouldn't say over, but there was a strong kind of leaning at the time, and so I think there's less Democratic engagement overall. And I think the other part of it too is that there was a very strong Republican engagement in terms of voting. I think a lot of people thought Republicans would stay home and not go cast their ballot since there was no challenger to the president. But I think those folks decided they wanted to go vote, and they're a little more reliable in terms of voting. But what we're seeing right now is there's a lot of school districts that are hesitant about going in November for a number of reasons. And the reasons that you brought up, raising taxes, or is this the right time? How do we deal with the pandemic? But with that said, a bond measure right now is going to give school districts, or the school districts that have remaining authorization, already have a bond authorization, or those who seek it and get one in November, are going to have the most flexibility in terms of having to deal with whatever we have to deal with in the fall with COVID or any other related issues we have. And so it is truly a decision made at a local level. And what we're seeing across the board right now is a lot of people who were looking at November 2020, especially in the Central Valley, kind of reevaluate that. The Bay Area, for the most part, that we had the most success in March. There weren't that many things that failed in March at a local level in terms of school bonds. And it's just a continued recognition that schools need additional funding, that facilities are not going to fix themselves. And the money that we do get from the state should go towards education and the classroom use, and that an outside source may be necessary for this funding. So it's really regionalized in terms of the overall response, but that's kind of the in a nutshell. And Dr. C is laughing because he hears my dog.
I'm like, somebody's guard dog needs to go eat or take a walk.
Yeah, it's about that time for him. But no, so it's a good question. But overall, I think we'll see in November a smaller participation statewide as people try to figure out how to deal with COVID-19 and how that necessarily affects the individual districts. But I think those folks who do go in November, once again, it's a good time to go. I think some of the quote enthusiasm that people were expecting in March will be re-energized in November. Because what's very important, especially I think in the Bay Area, is that March wasn't about voting against the president. March was about finding out who was going to go against the president. And quite frankly, there's a lot of folks, especially on the Democratic side, who didn't really care who went up against him, because they knew in November, my vote's going to be, against the president, not necessarily for the candidate that is scoring against them. So it's going to be a different dynamic in November. I think, especially in the Bay Area, we're going to see a large influx of energy, if you will, around that. And then I think the other part of it that makes it very, very fruitful for folks who do go, it's an all-mail ballot in terms of the absentee ballots. I mean, that's going to be huge. The fact that you're going to know that you're going to have 3 to 4 weeks to engage with voters, as opposed to maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and you can take the strategy with all of the voters. It's not one of the things we have to parse it up between the folks that vote at the polls and people that vote by mail. You actually have 2 or 3 weeks to do that, and given the level of support, or the base level of support demonstrated in this survey after that first time we asked the question, it's the ultimately that campaign is going to be about reinforcing the people who support the schools to show up and vote, and not wasting time on using the energies to convince somebody that from a no to a yes. So I think that base level support is also working in your district's favor.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we've been sheltered in place for the last 3 months, and we're probably going to be sheltered for many more months thereafter. So people are saving money. They haven't been spending their money. They'll have money. So maybe they'll be generous. Perhaps we push.
Amazon has all my money.
We push
there's
them on. Maybe they'll be generous. Josh, did you have a comment?
I just had a small question. The presentation was very clear, so I don't have a lot of questions. Thank you for that. The one area you said there was some underrepresentation of Republican voters.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure how big that underrepresentation was. Can you quantify that in any way?
I think it's about 3 to 6%. I can't remember the exact number, but it's less than double digits. So it's like, let's call it 5%.
In our district?
As compared to the district as a whole. The Bay Area is a little weird because you have this huge block of independents, and it can go either way. Independent, unfortunately, is kind of, in some places it's where the right and the left kind of meet, the other side of the spectrum. But no. So I mean, there's some underrepresentation there. But once again, I think if you take the most pessimistic view in terms of the margin of error, that should account for some of it. Not to say that every Republican voter is a no. It's just that there are sometimes those characteristics are often. It's one of the characteristics that sometimes is folks that are not necessarily as for taxes as others. I mean, it's usually the combination of over 65 and self-identified as Republican. That's usually the so not to get too deep into it, but if you look at the overall data, if you want to look at your most ideologically opposed to taxes, it's a white male over the age of 65 who's self-identified as a Republican. Those are the folks that more often than not are just ideologically against tax, not against schools, not against children, not against things, just taxes. Like I said, I think overall, if you look at the numbers and you take away that 5% all the way through, we get a close approximation of what that undersampling has done.
Thank you.
Deborah, did you have a question as well?
Well, I guess one of the things you mentioned was the impact that COVID-19 will have on this election and this issue, this bond measure itself. And then I'm wondering, maybe this isn't an appropriate question for you, but how do you frame the bond measure in a way that it is speaks to that? Because, for instance, if you have a resurgence and more sheltering in place and more on distance learning, and people begin to think, well, why should we improve these facilities that aren't necessarily going to be used very much, which I don't think we want to get to that place in our district. But still, I mean, how do you address that?
Certainly, I would go back to the statements that were made in the survey that talk about the investments in school facilities or the need to improve the schools. I think there's a recognition in the community that regardless of when you return, at this point in time, I don't think voters believe that they're going to be teaching their kids at their kitchen table for the next 40 years. I think the vast majority of parents are hopeful that there's some semblance of normalcy in the fall, and that that continues, and they don't have to go back to a shelter place or teaching at the dining room table. So I think both of them are hopeful that will be the case, and therefore they would be generally supportive because that's where their kids are going to return to. So at this point in time, and once again, that voter attitude can change. But at this time, I don't think anybody's envisioning that the next 5 years are going to be spent with a kid, in the next room trying to learn at their house. I think most people believe and still hold on to the idea that schools are necessary facilities. And I think in some ways, COVID-19 kind of helps because there are some improvements that do need to be made to your facilities. You have old facilities at both sites. And there are improvements that need to be made, and I think that's recognized overall. So as long as the public and especially registered voters believe that we will return to schools sometime in the near future. And my understanding is in Marin County, there is a plan in place and what have you. But if for some reason that hope was extinguished between now and November, yeah, I would agree with you that there would be some trouble communicating the need for those facilities improvements to the public.
Absolutely. We are returning. Are there any other board questions?
Just great work, you guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're here.
They did good.
Yeah.
Dr. Garcia, any intent from the public?
I am scanning. We're popular tonight. We have 34 participants. Chris Durbin would like to make a comment, followed by Barb Killey.
All right, in that order.
In that order.
And just as a reminder before you start, Chris, even though we are on this virtual platform, we're still going to keep it to 3 minutes. So, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just have a question. I think we are such an atypical district in so many ways, and given that we had a desegregation order, the first one in 50 years from the top law enforcement agent of the state, just 10 months ago, that we're vastly a white, like Marin County, the district is mostly white people, but the students are, if I'm not mistaken, 2/3 from families of color. And most significantly, I think you said this was done on June 7th. And this is a week after George Floyd was murdered and had a huge impact. We don't even know what to call it at this point. It just seems like so many atypicals about us, and I was wondering if you thought it would be. I noted that you said that on one item about, favorability for educational equity, excellence, and integration was one of the lowest scores, 43%. I think you said maybe there was less specific wording, that's what you thought, but that is such a huge glaring, those issues in this district. I don't know, I just, makes me wonder what you think about the impact of all of those things. Like, do you think that they were more favorable because of those incidents, or especially George Floyd? The whole world was really a week after that.
Or of the racially charged time that we're experiencing right now. I will say, and Amelia, I'm gonna let you go, answer that, but this was a sample pool of people. So.
Thank you for that question, Chris.
Yeah, and I think it was done from the 7th through the 14th? 13th, so it did cover.
Yes, I mean, we did a poll, and obviously with that going on, the pandemic we thought was kind of waning until it's not. We had economic uncertainty throughout this whole process. At the end of the day, it's hard to say what effect it had. And it's hard to say, this is truly a snapshot in time, I think is the point, Chris, that you're bringing across. And it may reflect a very specific moment that may not necessarily be there in November. But what I would tell you is that, there is a understanding, I guess I put it, that for many folks in the school community and I think in the community as a whole, that education has always been a key component to success. And I think overall, even in times where that may be so unique, what I'll tell you is that, from our experience, we've done probably, hundreds of voter opinion poll surveys over the years. And I could probably take a guess of what, some answers come back as, but I think overall in your community, there's a value, regardless if you're a student, a parent, non-parent, a value on education that will continue to go throughout the whole thing. And I think it goes back to the idea that, what is the what is the overriding purpose or the objective of a school district? And there are a certain block of voters who always think that your job is to make sure my kid gets into a good high school and goes off to a great college, and that's your job. Whether or not your kid is a jerk or not, so be it. So I think from that standpoint, it's one of those things where whether or not where you fall in social justice and those other things, I think the question there may have sparked some folks thinking whether or not that was a core function of a school. Is it the school's job to solve the world's ills? And that could be some of that pushback, is saying, look, that's not the job of the school. The teachers do enough. They're already the counselor, they're already the social worker, they're already they already do all these things, right? And so from that standpoint, it could be one of those things where the response not necessarily is, no, I'm not in support of social justice. It may just be more, I'm in support of that. I just don't think it's the job of the school district to do it. And that's what I meant by that. It might have been some imprecise language there in terms of what the role of schools may be.
Okay, I see. Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you, Chris. Barbara.
Hi. My question is along the same lines as Chris's, but a little more general. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm still a little bit in poll shock from the 2016 national election. And I'm wondering if, the numbers that you gave us look like this would be a really favorable outcome. But do you ever see that your normal measuring guides don't work and the election goes the other way? And if you have an experience with that, any of the causes for that?
Luckily, if I may,
Yes.
luckily we're not dealing with an electoral college in this case. We're dealing with the popular vote. And so, we do think that these results, they're not so close that I'm concerned. What I am concerned about is that, this is, again, a snapshot in time, and it may change in the future. We don't know what's going to happen. The pandemic might get worse. What we do know is that what happened in March elections, we saw a lot of school districts with pretty good polling numbers, solid polling numbers. But as the pandemic sort of got on, we saw the stock market shock. Stock market crashed right around Election Day, and that certainly did have an impact on the elections at the time. So with social science research like surveys, it's a guide. We can't guarantee that it's going to pass, but we think you've got a really good shot of making your case to the public, and we know that the public supports particular projects, and they support the tax rates that we're presenting. Those are all good indicators. Now, the hard part of the committee, and we talk to people, we try to track people down. We talked to 324 or so folks. The key in November is going to be, are we going to be able to get out our supporters to go vote and make sure that they do the deed? That's the disconnect between polling and actual elections that take place. People who have an axe to grind, people who are unhappy, typically do come out and make that known through their ballots. People that think that things are going pretty well, things are good, they're happy, maybe things are moving along in the right direction, they may or may not vote, and that's the job of the campaign committee to make that happen. So I take your comments seriously, and we're cognizant of that, but we do believe that these survey results are a good indication of a roadmap for the district to take and for the campaign committee to take.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So it's kind of a combination of the downside could be outside things that are beyond our control, and then the upside is the understanding that we really have to get the vote out.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. Before we move on, is there other, did you have a question, Caroline?
No, I just said great questions.
Yes, it was.
There is one more intent from the public to comment.
Okay.
President Green, I'd like to recognize Jeff Knowles.
All right.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you,
Mr.
Dr. Garcia.
Mr. Knowles, did you just get on? Did you just get on?
I had called in and I was listening to the whole presentation, and then I just was able to get on my computer.
All right. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks. So yes, my name is Jeff Knowles. I'm a district parent and a board member at Willow Creek Academy. And I wanted to make a couple of observations. Well, first of all, I think a bond is crucial for our district, mainly because the Nevada Street campus is in dire shape, as we all know, and needs, by the district's own estimate, at least $30 million to bring up to speed. And so we desperately need a bond. Unfortunately, I'm not sure we're well positioned to pass one in November. As someone who's fairly involved, I'm unaware of any public outreach on this. In particular, there's been no outreach to Willow Creek Academy, which represents the majority of families in the district, nor has there been any outreach to the city of Sausalito, which represents the majority of taxpayers and voters. And I don't know of any general public outreach. So I think that's a problem. I also think that we need to be careful about these survey results. I received the survey, although I wasn't able to complete it. I was concerned that some of the questions were a bit confusing. And so I'd be wary of relying on these numbers. So as much as I think we need a bond, I am deeply concerned about our ability to pass one.
Thank you so much, sir, for your comments. Duly noted. I do believe that I don't know if you were on the line at the time, but in terms of the outreach question and, making sure there's transparency and on and on and on, that did come up. So thank you.
Yes, I heard that. That's why I made my comment.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
We do have one more intent from the public to comment. I'd like to recognize Damian Morgan.
Mr. Morgan. Are you muted, Mr. Morgan?
Oh, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. There you go, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Toko and Mrs. Ida Green. Thank you. Damian Morgan here, born and raised in the community. I am a Marin City Community Services District board member. I have a couple comments, questions, questions. First is regarding the bond. This bond, I did come in the meeting late, so if I'm asking for repeated information, excuse me. As far as the obvious, coronavirus, COVID-19, the timing of this, what's the experts? I can't think of the guy's name the young man who was just speaking. I came in late. What's your feedback, or what's your knowledge of presenting this bond to the public regarding in the middle of a pandemic? What are your thoughts, or your concerns, or your positive feedback, or your, like you said, your knowledge, expertise in that? And secondly, what should we say? What should I say to, for instance, my mother, who was on a fixed income, to the and other seniors in the community? Is there an age? I know some bonds, I'm not sure what they're called. I'm not an expert in this. Some bonds have regulations where if you're a certain age, you don't have to. You can opt out of it if you want to. Is that an option, or what do you say to the to that? Is that option available? And what's your feedback? Your as a community. What's our message to seniors? Black folk. I'll say it. Black folk who are on a fixed income and already struggling. What's your feedback on that, sir?
Thank you for your question, Damian. So, Emil or Abel, which would you like to?
I'll take the first swing, and Abel can clean up for me. So in terms of COVID-19, I think one of the things that we saw was a positive overall. Our people are home, which means that in terms of being able to contact people via phone, via email. I'm not sure how many people are going to be opening doors to people knocking on them, given the current pandemic. But, in terms of being able to reach people, there are going to be strategies that are going to have to change over time just to accommodate that. But as long as people are home, that those are opportunities in which to communicate with them. To start answering your second question, regarding whether or not there's any exemptions, this is a general obligation bond. There is no exemption based on age for this type of financing mechanism. The exemption does exist for partial taxes and sometimes for certain special taxes, let's say like a Belarus. But in this particular case, there would be no exemption. Overall, I think especially, we recognize that there is a financial burden associated with this. And I think that, you mentioned specifically the Black community, and, there are parallels with the Latino community where I think that there's a high value on education, and we all have multi-generational households and families. And so I think it's a very upfront conversation with our senior citizens, especially our senior citizens of color, about the benefits that we're trying to put in place here. And there may be things that community values more in terms of the improvements they want to see than the rest of the community, and we have to be cognizant of that. And I think through the board's proposed process regarding transparency and having community meetings and so forth, that they can get some of that feedback. And given what the ultimate project list may be, depending on what that is and type of improvements that are being proposed, that at that point we would engage in conversation or outreach, if you will, in terms of specific elements or segments of the community to make sure that A, their concerns are heard, and then B, to ascribe some value to them ultimately as well regarding the improvements.
Thank you, Emilio. I think for some of us, we didn't even imagine that we would see buildings that were still standing from 1945, 1947.
Yeah.
We got a couple of them on both campuses. Sorry, Abel, did you have a
Yeah, I just wanted to add, President Green, if I may, just to elaborate a little bit. This is a question that often comes up, especially with folks that are on fixed income. One of the questions that we asked, and you may or may not be aware of this, but the school district, South Toledo Marin City School District, has the lowest tax rate of all elementary schools in Marin County. The current tax rate that's being levied for your schools is $16 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. And so when you look at your tax rate compared to all the other districts, it's the lowest. And we can forward that chart to the board. I think we shared that at some point with the board.
Mhm.
That said, I wanted to be clear that the tax rate of $30 would be levied on property owners in the district. And so a lot of seniors, for example, in my family, my parents bought their home a long time ago, and their assessed value is a lot lower than my assessed value of my property. So because they bought their home a lot lower, it's assessed at a lower value. And so they pay a lot lower tax than someone who's, let's say, newer to the community and has a higher market value. So this tax is not based on the market value of the home. It's based on the assessed valuation of the property. And for most seniors, that assessed valuation, if you've owned your home for a long time, for maybe 30 years or longer, it tends to be a lot lower than what the market value is for that home. So there's a sort of a built-in protection, if you will. So I hope that helps address part of your question as well, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. Dr. Garcia, do you have the last word here before we move on?
I did get a comment via chat. Somebody's in an environment where they felt like they could not make a verbal comment. It's from Yasmin McGrain.
Okay.
And she shared that her husband received the survey by phone and has a career background in marketing and market research, and said it was a very well executed survey process. So I just wanted to add that comment to the record, and I don't see any other raised hands. So I think that we can move on. Thank you, Abel and Emilio. We really appreciate your presence and your expertise and your presentation to the Board of Trustees.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
I'd like to add something very quickly before we move on. It was on the last question, and I think it's really important because it will be a dialogue in the community. I appreciate everything that was said in the answer in terms of assessed property values and people who have owned their property longer and they're depressed compared to people that have recently purchased. But we're already hearing a narrative around the impact on renters and how some of this could be passed on to people's rents. So I think we just need to be prepared for some of that dialogue, some of that kind of as part of a no campaign, if you will.
Mhm.
But from what I saw of the survey, I don't think you're going to see, I mean, I'm no expert, but I wouldn't guess you would see, double-digit movement for that type of thing. So, but it will be something as part of the dialogue. So I just wanted to pause on it and recognize its importance.
Are those sublets, Josh? So are you referring to renters that would be renting from second units in homes?
Or even renting an entire home. Landlords are often apt to try to pass on increased costs to those renters. And when presented with that information, sometimes it affects how renters vote. Again, I don't think it will move the needle, below where you need to be, but it will be part of the dialogue, part of the campaign. And I want to acknowledge that.
Got it. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I, for one, hope to see you again, but we'll see as we push forward with this. All right, Dr. Garcia, I believe that brings us up to 4.02, Facilities Master Plan Update. You're muted, sir. And just by the way, just an FYI, these are all discussions. Nothing obviously has been decided. Lots more breath to be had. Mr. Lynch, nice to see you.
There you are. Cool.
Before you start, Mr. Lynch, I just want to preference that Caroline and I saw this as well. We had a facilities meeting the other night. So
yeah, and I just want to iterate what Ida just said, is these are just kind of concepts and idea generators to then take to community discussions, and nothing's been decided, and Mr. Lynch has a great ability to move little buildings around on the plan. So so that's what needs to happen. It'll happen.
Does Superintendent Garcia, you want to intro or try to get started?
No, just want to thank you. Apologize for being muted earlier. I gave an intro that nobody heard. But yeah, Leo is here with us from WLC, our facilities master planning firm. And as Trustee Van All said, and I want to invite everybody to lean into the idea that the bond survey is something to lean into as potentially encouraging news if that's the direction we decide to go in. But no decision has been made. And everything that Leo and WLC and Steve Kodama are going to share with us tonight are still very much in the concept phase. And I appreciate the calls from the public to talk to the city of Sausalito and talk to the Willow Creek community and talk to the senior community and talk to our community at large. And we are committed to doing so. As I said in some of the opening comments, we have an engagement plan to reach out strongly and get feedback on all of these ideas prior to making any decision from the entire community. So thank you, Leo, and take it away.
Great, that was a good introduction because I was going to say the same thing regarding what we've done so far. A lot of the work we've done is based on our facilities analysis that we did. We did a pretty comprehensive facilities analysis of all the buildings on both campuses, and a lot of this generated from that, looked at the condition of the buildings. So this is starting off with, this is just an overall district plan showing the location of both campuses, the limits of the district as well as the city limits for Marin City and Sausalito. So we can get it in terms of context of what areas are actually covered by the school district. Okay, we move on to the next one.
It's a lot of coyote
I should
territory.
say also, yes, a huge territory. I should also say also that with me, the assist me in this presentation will be Ted St. Germain, who's from the project management, my office, and Steve and Terry are here as well from Kodama Diseño. So this is the existing buildings on Bayside MLK campus. As each of the numbers, these are all the dates of the buildings were actually closed out and approved by DSA. These are the dates the buildings were actually built. This is the days, and usually for a lot of these buildings, these closeout dates you see are several years after the construction of these buildings were put in place. Obviously, the oldest one on this campus is the Annex Building, which dates from 1945, which certainly has some wear and tear on it. And you've got the newest buildings up in are the portables and the modular buildings that were installed. And those date in terms of, again, completion and DSA closeout from 2015. And we do this because one of the problems that you have, some districts have, is that they have projects that aren't closed out on a campus, and you can't get permits to do new construction or even modernization on campuses if you have buildings on the campus that have not been closed out previously. So we always do an analysis to see what the status is for all the buildings on the campus. Move on. You guys have done a good job of getting all this done. Then based on our facilities analysis that was done, this is sort of encapsulating that and looking at what the replacement value would be for each of these buildings over the next 10 years. And the buildings that are pink and reddish looking are the ones that really are going to need to be replaced. And within the next 10 years, some of them will close a lot sooner than that because they're just not going to last. Obviously, your main building, the main classroom, number 4 on the chart here, is the newest and in the best shape, as well as the portals in number 5. Okay.
I could add something real quick. Can I add something? I think we forgot in our preamble that this master plan is kind of the long term, could be 10 years, 20 years in the making type plan, and we'll see what projects we would prioritize off of the master plan. And what might fit within the current bond, and then what might be rolled out in a future bond, as well as what might be funded through partnerships with other agencies. So I don't want, it to be misled that what's being rolled out as ideas is what we're going to try and fit into this bond.
Right. It's like a gradual, not everything, we're not saying that everything is to be done or can be done in one step.
Right.
Specifically when you're looking at both campuses.
Right.
Everything unequivocally cannot be done in one step.
No.
And we're going to have priorities.
Yeah. And I think Mr. Lynch said that at one point too.
Yeah.
You have to do it in gradual.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I said that at our last meeting, and one of the things, one of the things that, and that's an important point, I'm glad you brought it up, is that for any of these master plans and whatever master plans finally decided upon, or whichever plans are decided upon at the end of the by end of next month, you're not going to be able to bond it from your first bond to get that work done. These master plans are viewed long term over a series of years, and will require multiple bonds to get all the work done that needs to be done for the district. So we'll be looking at phasing and see and that's going to be part of the engagement process with the communities of each community for each of the schools. Is what is the priority projects? Which projects should go first and are most important to that local community to get done, and or which projects are the most dire need of getting done. So those are kind of ways that we make those decisions about how do we phase aspects of the projects in.
And just to add in, also under a unified school option, what would we need under a unified school for each of the campuses based on which grades are where?
Exactly. And one of the things that we'll get to in a second is that, well, let me just finish the existing conditions first, and I'll talk about that as we start into the next phase. These are the existing buildings, just locating what is on each of the campuses and where it is. And this is Bayside with the fields. The classrooms are in the blue. The outdoor play area is kind of the yellowish, greenish area. I don't know what color it looks like on your screen. Every screen's a little different. And then you have the multi-purpose space, the office, and the library that are all there as well. So this is just existing conditions that you have on the site with the number of classrooms that you have there as well. And so what we've done for both campuses, we have essentially 3 schemes that you'll be looking at in just a moment, just as eye-openers, essentially, to start some conversations about where they might want to go with them. And here's a second floor upper level for Bayside with a second floor plan, with the reddish color being the roofs, which means those are 1-story buildings, and the blue being the second floor for the main building on the campus. And so with that, I'll have Ted begin to talk about the project as soon as I finish the demo plan. And in these demo plans for Bayside, in all cases based on the initial analysis, the annex building and those portables adjacent to the annex buildings are the buildings that we're proposing to demolish and take down and be part of the new development. We're supposing that should be part of the first phase of work that's done, if put any work done on Bayside MLK. Okay? As well as there will be a lot of work done on the fields, that the fields needs to be obviously redone, the conditions of that. So Ted will talk about these, the next couple of schemes.
Good evening, everybody. So to start to look at our first scheme for Bayside MLK campus, we overlaid the track area and basically keeping the same three-corner 400-meter track that's existing, widening it to 5 lanes, and adding, a new pre-kindergarten, transitional kindergarten classrooms to a large anchor building that'll also house a maintenance and operations building, as well as the new district offices and parent resource center. In addition to that, we'll be adding classrooms to replace the portables and a full-size gymnasium with the a dance room or additional phys ed classroom in there as well, and looking at the option of providing a backstage crossover connection for the existing stage to improve the existing conditions for theatrical events. And that will include the purple color in the main middle school building is looking at modernization costs over a few years or over the lifetime of this building, which is why it's significantly higher than the standalone modular building classrooms down here. And so we'd be looking at redoing that multi-purpose room and improving the acoustics, removing the basketball stanchions, and really making that a dedicated theater, cafeteria, kind of multi-purpose but not athletic space.
Also, the one thing you may ask about, and we'll tell you right now, we have not costed all of these schemes out yet. That's the next step that we're going to do after we get some feedback about these schemes, will be to look at them and to do some costing, some initial costing on them, so you can get a sense of what each of these facility costs are going to be, and it'll be broken down, not just overall costs. We'll have the overall cost, but it'll also be broken down by each component of that overall, all the changes that we have in it.
So on to scheme number 2, similar on the demo plan, the fields are demoed as well as the portables and annex building. So this scheme, we looked at keeping a oval track to try to free up a little bit more space and keep the inside area a bit more flexible, allowing for full-size soccer fields and, you know, lacrosse, football, whatever sports the district envisions utilizing the field for, or renting the field out to generate additional revenue for the school district. This plan does involve the concept of a partnership with the Marin County, or the community center, which has a master plan of their own to build a full-size gymnasium, which the school district may be able to go into a joint use agreement with them, you know, freeing up additional space on the campus and providing, you know, allowing the school district to focus on spending the bond dollars on developing classrooms. This plan develops a 2-story classroom building with 8 additional classrooms behind the multipurpose room, as well as a cluster of specialty classrooms, whether that be video, audio editing, dance, art, digital media development, you know, it's kind of expansion to the current academic offerings at the district. The garden is reshaped to maintain a similar footprint and allow, you know, the kind of growth and community development in that area, as well as, you know, emphasizing the nutritional aspects that the district is already teaching using their full and well-developed vegetable garden. This plan also looks at adding a extension to the existing library, allowing outside access for community outreach, community development, and community use throughout or after school hours. And similarly, the Parent Resource Center, district office, pre-kindergarten, and maintenance building are housed down in the lower corner of the campus. And scheme 3, demo plan is similar, and my computer's freezing. There we go. So this scheme again brings the basketball, or brings a full gymnasium onto the campus.
Oh. You bounced ahead. There you go.
Yeah, we shrink the track down to a little bit smaller, so it's no longer the traditional competitive 400 meter, but still 360 meters, allowing for a 100 meter straight run, and allowing for a middle school size baseball diamond and a full size soccer field, lacrosse field in the center of the track. This plan frees up a little bit more space for future development as needed in the lower corner, and again is adding classrooms and specialized educational spaces onto the campus to replace the portables that are being demolished out. So we'll move on to the Nevada Street campus, Willow Creek campus.
Are there any questions on the base side before we move to Nevada Street?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Mine is related to parking. One of the concerns I often hear on any of these schemes is, especially as the ball field gets renovated and the possibility of a gym pops up in various options, is parking. I see you have a lot of area on the, I guess that'd be the southwest side. But anything you can elaborate relative to parking?
Yeah, unfortunately, the way the campus is currently configured, we're sort of forced into having parking in the location that you see on in that corner down where the admin offices are. It would be great if we could have some more parking off of Phillips, but you're right up to the street on Phillips Drive. And other than the small little triangle that's right outside of the library area, you don't really have any space you can put parking anywhere there. There's been conversations about perhaps in the future trying to do something jointly with the church, so that perhaps some of their parking could be utilized during the days when they're not having any kind of a special event or anything going on. And that's the only thing that we could think of it that's up front, other than the parking you have up front now, unfortunately. So we try to put as much park as we can in the lower corner. As you can see in each of the schemes, we've got parking, different configuration, but we still put parking in those locations around the district office. So visitors will be able to.
We don't have parking as it is.
No, you don't. You don't have any now. So this is actually adding parking. That they have, well, you will have some place to park at this point with any of these schemes that is eventually come up with, or other schemes that may come up later on.
So there's a couple of things I would add to that. I think you've covered the church well. There, with the community service district across the street, there was a look at what is possible in terms of making changes on Phillips Drive. You know, encourage that dialogue to continue between the two organizations, because there are some possibilities there, as well as the kind of additional parking around that area. And then the other observation, this is more from just me personally, is, and this is a perfect slide to be looking at, you know, there's that undeveloped triangle over by the ball field on this particular scheme. And so I don't know what the optimal number of spaces is, depending on different use patterns for ball fields and gyms and things like that. But it feels like in some of these schemes, there are actually additional space options to consider. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, we actually have met with the folks. I know Steve wants to comment on that. We've had some meetings with the folks across the street about the opportunities to actually work with them on it. We presented this to their new director, and we are scheduled to meet with the board again to kind of talk through how there might be some kind of a symbiotic relationship between what they're doing, because they have to, as I mentioned before, they have their own master plan that they're working on. And they do plan, they're hoping to put up a full-size gymnasium with a lot of other facilities around it. So as you saw, the schemes too is actually looking at how do we, if that happens, how we might work together and that utilizing as a joint use facility with them on that. So that is a conversation that is going on.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yeah, I just appreciate Josh saying in this scheme 3, that corner, that triangle, well, it may be a space for additional future expansion. It could be a parking lot in the interim, additional parking, or concession stand for the ball field, or
restrooms, or changing.
Restrooms, right, exactly. You know, but also if there's redevelopment that happens within Marin City, we may get increases in enrollment in the future. So it is nice to see that there's space for future expansion if needed.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. All right, Mr. Lynch.
Okay, so if we move on over to Willow Creek, we did a couple of schemes at Willow Creek. We still have to have some meetings with them and go through these and get some more input from them. But again, we did the same analysis about the projects on their site. They also have a 1945 building. Wow. It's been a big year for putting up buildings in Sausalito, Marin City. And so that's their Robin's Nest building, which is 1945. And there's some older buildings from 1977, 1991. And the newest building that we show again, this is when it was closed out, was the portables that were closed out in 2017. And before that was 2013. And those are all portables. So all of your buildings themselves are a little old. They are definitely in need of some work. So if we go on to the next one.
Yeah, I just want to point out the portables are older than 2017. They were actually just relocated, and there was a new slab and utility connections put in. So I think they're 10, 15 years old. So they're a lot older than 2017.
Yeah.
So where does that date come from? Is that the date that they came onto the campus?
I think that's the date they got moved down to that lower area.
Yeah, and they get approved by DSA on that date, or DSA
Okay.
finally closed out on those dates. Yes, those are dates that they have on record.
Yeah.
Again, this is the same analysis again in terms of the replacement value. You can see majority of the buildings need to be either 30% or more replaced, need to be replaced, 40%, and then 60. Obviously, the ones up front there need to go. So this is what, again, based on the facilities analysis that was done and the existing condition of these buildings. Okay, so we can move on to the next one. And once again, the existing floor plan, this is just an existing layout of the campus with the play field in the center. The classroom spaces are in the blue. The green are your support space, the library, your NPR. The light blue is kind of the teacher offices, and you have your as I mentioned, NPR, and then they have the paved areas are light gray, and so this is the first floor, and we also have a second floor plan that shows the same thing, with majority of the buildings on campus being 1 story. That's why you see the reddish color that's the roofs of the buildings, and you just have the 1 2-story facility with a classroom, the 1 classroom building there. Okay. Now we have some different schemes here in terms of demolition and the layouts of this one. This campus obviously is very hilly. It's got buildings that are in dire need of a lot of work. So you'll see that we have various buildings that are being moved out, at least conceptually, on each of these schemes that we are going to show you today. So we'll start with this one, where number 1 are buildings proposed to be demolished, and the player that's going to be demolished, and then Ted can walk through what we do when we take those spaces out.
So this plan, we focused on sort of minimizing the classroom space based on enrollment and focusing on modernization rather than replacement and new construction. So this plan relocates the admin building from the center of campus to a driveway located off of Buchanan, providing a student drop-off and loop access, minimizing traffic concerns off of Buchanan and congestion during parent drop-off times, as well as adding new classrooms, creating a couple more education-focused courtyards around the campus, bringing this 3-block classroom building, which is facing up the hill and sort of feels separated from the campus, into sort of the middle, addressing it with another classroom building and creating a courtyard that will bring students into there and make it less of a blind spot for the campus. This plan looks at just modernizing the existing NPR, which is small and sort of underserved, but there's not always money in the budget to build a new NPR. So we're looking at just modernizing that, keeping the K-pod, and keeping much of the upper campus, just kind of trimming off some of the classrooms to help fund the modernization that's needed to upgrade the exteriors, roofing, and interiors of these classrooms. And then this plan also includes a new 0 to 2 daycare, or it could potentially be a parent resource center, in Marin City to match the one, or in Sausalito to match the one provided in Marin City. In the district office, it's kind of, we've called it out as a daycare, but it's more just playing with the idea of a rentable space or community space on this campus. And then scheme number 2, we're looking at doing a little bit more demo, taking out much of the lower campus, the NPR building, demoing the upper campus, and the Robin's Nest and portables as well. So on this scheme, we're looking at developing similarly a drop-off loop and visitor parking at the front of the campus off of Buchanan, and moving the school office kind of a little bit closer to the actual buildings and the heart of the campus, rather than leaving it out there on an island separated from everything. This scheme focuses on building a new NPR building and expanding that with a large grand staircase connecting up to the staff parking, creating a kind of educational and multi-use space focused around what has to sort of remain as a emergency vehicle access turnaround, bringing vehicle access, drop-offs, deliveries, access into the middle of the campus, and then building a large courtyard focused around specialty classrooms and the existing library, creating a kind of science and creativity corner on the campus. In these specialty classrooms, you could have maker spaces, coding labs, computer labs, art classrooms, kind of any sort of expanded educational program the district wishes to offer, as the programs continue to develop through the course of time. And then we're looking at modernizing the baseball fields and basketball fields to improve them as well.
The blue line is the creek, right?
Yes. This plan also shows daylighting the creek from kind of the upper middle of the campus all the way through to the property line. And the idea of the creek does run all the way up through from property line to property line, but kind of as you get into this wooded area, the concern about what's falling into the creek and how that's going to affect the students as they're using the creek for educational purposes, or just going throughout their days, becomes a little bit more of a concern. So we're minimizing the exposure of the creek as it travels along the site. And then this third scheme really looks at kind of how to reimagine the site, with many of the buildings being kind of old and aging. What if we wanted to just completely wipe the slates clean and really try to condense and re-envision the campus, just for, kind of a conversation starter. So this plan looks at relocating the existing Little League field down to Buchanan, creating additional parking off of there and providing a larger parking lot for the gymnasium located on the site of the upper campus. We have then a smaller parking lot and drop-off or loop area for the Parent Resource Center, child daycare idea, and the school admin office, reducing traffic that needs to travel through the campus or even up through the rear driveway of the campus. We locate a cluster of classrooms for potentially the lower grades, right as you're coming out of the admin area, and then a new media center, library in the middle of the campus, and then specialty classrooms as well as standard classrooms for upper grades, located up on the hill, all facing towards the bay, optimizing those views and really kind of taking advantage of the stepped nature of this site, and looking at how we can kind of optimize the views and minimize the blind spots. In all of these schemes, the existing teacher parking remains up on the hill. And, we're just looking to add visitor parking throughout the site or in, special locations depending upon what it would need to serve. And that is our last scheme for the Nevada Street campus. So I'll open it up to the board members for comment.
So once again, we did have conversation on this when we did the facilities a couple days ago, and one of the suggestions that was brought up was from our maintenance director of operations, and possibly going back and looking at where that might fit into. And again, these are renderings. It's very fluid. We still have to, spend some time with the community at large, and of course with the board, and on and on. So,
I have may I ask a question?
Please.
I have a question. Go ahead,
I
Debbie.
had a question, Josh. Sorry.
Yeah.
This is Deborah. I had a question. And both campuses, but especially Nevada Street, do you see scheme segues from scheme 2 to scheme 3? I mean, are they developed with an incremental look at, do you have to choose scheme 3 before you, no. I hope you
No,
can.
not yet. We haven't developed them that way yet. What these are, as we stated earlier, these are ideas. What we hope to do after all the meetings with you and with the board and with the community is then sort of take all these concepts and begin to do just what you said, where we would have a final scheme that can be incrementally put together across the board. Right now, these are just a lot of different concepts, a lot of different ideas. And you may say, well, I like this aspect of scheme 1, and I like this aspect of scheme 3. I don't like any of these schemes. Like, and we talk about doing something a little different. We're totally open to that right now. So they haven't been done in that level of thinking yet.
Thank you.
Josh.
Yes, thank you. There was a fair amount of work put into, I don't know if we called them schemes at the time, but options schemes for both sites. I think it was 4 years ago for a potential bond. How much of that was taken into consideration? In particular, I don't see, I think, which was the recommended scheme for the Nevada Street campus reflected here, which at the time I think had a full-size gym. So were they looked at?
So I think when I'm sorry, Mr. Lynch, but I was going to say when we first met you guys, when we had first introductions, Caroline had given, because she's really good at keeping some archiving information, and so she did give a folder. And so, Mr. Lynch, I believe you were there.
Yes, we did receive those documents, and we do have some of those, but those were not, we didn't incorporate those directly because we wanted to start fresh. But if there's certainly some schemes that from those that there are some preferences because people have worked on those in the past, we can certainly incorporate those. And this scheme too, particularly, does have a full-size gym has been added because we know that the existing NPR space is way too small for the campus, particularly after the unification process takes place.
And I think you did pick up some pieces from those drawings, which was that the admin building might be better served down to the lower part of campus rather than the upper middle part of campus. Some of the other parts from those drawings were the NPR was actually down towards where you have building 1 on the lower part of campus. And I think there was a soccer field, like a small one that was across the baseball field to allow it to be a multi-use field. But, you know, I think that when we engage with the community, it might be helpful to bring those prior drawings forward to help generate ideas and conversations about what are some things that were discussed previously. You definitely have some new ideas on here, I think, that weren't talked about earlier, which, you know, personally I like, but, you know, so I think it's helpful, you know, to have two sets of eyes to now go through these concepts as far as two perspectives from two different firms, and kind of take the best of all worlds.
I would agree with that.
We can certainly bring those with us.
I also think it's important to bring them forward to kind of honor that work, because it went beyond small committees. And so I think people would feel heard if they saw that work referenced.
Yeah, agreed. I think it was 4 or 5 different meetings at the school site for the Nevada Street campus. Quite a bit of work went into those.
Well, I think the whole idea, the whole concept that, you know, a la carte, if you will, you know, and as Mr. Lynch was addressing to Deborah, there's some things that can come from different schemes, and certainly these are renderings. Dr. Garcia, did you have a comment, sir?
There is one other intent from, I know you haven't called for public comment yet, but we're getting some requests.
So yeah, from the board. Josh, did you have another question?
Yeah, really it's about unification as it relates to this planning. You know, the plan 4 years ago did not have unification at the forefront. It was planning for 2 separate campuses, 2 separate schools. And I just don't know how unification is factored into these plans, and I think it really needs to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there is some, if I remember right, on the Bayside MLK campus, the modulars had some modernization, and that was with the idea that if it was to become a middle school campus, those classrooms would need to be converted from kindergarten preschool to more of a middle school type classroom.
Correct.
Yeah, and then with this campus, I think it was around the separate community center, like number 6 on this drawing, that would be needed on, say, an elementary campus, if that was what was to go here, to parallel the community center on the Bayside MLK campus. And I think the gymnasium here, number 2, is more of an elementary sized gymnasium, whereas the other is more of a full court basketball sized gymnasium that would be more for middle school. Anything else I'm missing, Mr. Lynch, on these 2?
No, you pretty much encapsulated. You were listening last time.
The test.
And you remembered.
Yeah, there you go.
But also that idea of having, you know, specialty classes, specific space for specialty classes. And I don't know if those were in the last concept, Caroline, or even if that is something that is on the Willow Creek campus right now.
Yeah, I think even as 2 separate K-8 specialty classrooms are always contemplated, because you would need it whether it's 1 school, 2 campuses, or 2 schools, 2 campuses.
For sure. Bonnie, do you have any comments? Josh, did you have another comment?
Just to follow up on the unification theme, you know, it feels to me that if you were to know what grades you're serving and what location, even how many locations you're planning, that would radically shape these ideas. So I just feel like we're doing a few very important things in parallel related to unification planning, facilities planning, and bond planning. And while you can do a certain amount in parallel, at the end of the day, the sequence I laid them out, really one impacts the next. So I'm hoping to see some kind of domino effect in those factored into our process.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I do too.
Dr. Garcia.
Yeah, thank you. That's absolutely our intent. We're hoping that the feedback beginning next week with the joint study session, and then as it goes out to the public, can inform that kind of iterative domino process. That's certainly our intent. That is a tight timeline. Want to acknowledge that. And I do think we have some intent from the public. I see two people right now. I want to recognize Marika Smith first, and then Yasmin McGrain second.
So should we stop sharing this screen, or
maybe just leave it in case
still
they
need
have
it up?
questions about it? Yeah.
So Marika?
I'll put myself on video if I can. Oh, I can't start my video. Okay. I appreciate the work here, and I understand that it's probably difficult to do many of the things that you've done absent what I would say would be the main ingredients that you need to start this work with, which would be what are your sort of assumptions for each of the sites programmatically, enrollment-wise, and then what are your guiding principles? One of the things that we spent a lot of our time doing, I guess in 2015-16, was really understanding the guiding principles for why we would make certain decisions. And so in any subsequent process, I think we almost need to go back to the drawing board and start there rather than have architectural ideas to prompt that conversation. I just caution that. And I also caution sort of bringing forward architectural concepts that involve a bunch of new construction when, you know, we don't necessarily have the budgets or the appetites to be able to, you know, go there right now. Certainly not with a bond that can only support so much. So, you know, my advice would be to start really with the programmatic assumptions, and that the schemes should follow, so that each scheme would actually be representing something very different programmatically, whether, you know, the basics, whether it's a K-5 versus a middle school campus, or are we looking at all K-8 or pre-K-8? Those are pretty critical decisions, and I think people can only respond once they understand what the attitude towards them is. And I know that Mr. Lynch, you know, I'm sure that that would be your preferred way of going about it, right? But the way that the timeline worked out, that probably wasn't an available choice for you. But I would strongly caution that we sort of take the time to step back and really think about what unification might mean and what the concepts for each site would really do to serve that, because I think we're all there right now. It's not, you know, it's a place where we all want to be, so let's get to it, but let's do the work first of really understanding the programmatic decisions that we need to make at each site relative to that. So I welcome a robust stakeholder engagement. I know the Willow Creek community you know, is very behind unification, but they also want to make sure that some of the ideas for the site that they thought pretty strongly about are reflected. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Marika.
Yeah, well said.
Who was the other person, Itoko?
Yasmin McGrain.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Yasmin.
Well, thank you for the presentation. And I just wanted to make two comments. One is to Josh's point, you know, I was part of a small group with Marika and a bunch of people that actually consolidated a lot of the feedback when we did the architectural drawings back then. But it was actually an extensive process. We had teachers and parents and community members mapping out on boards around the room, like what their ideas were in an ideal situation, facilities-wise. So it was like months of a process. And I think it would be really good to at least take the core group, which a lot of people are still around. The teacher that was on it, I think, was Jenny Schmidt and some of us. And we could just work directly, try and figure out to map some of these ideas and see what still might make sense. And then the second thing is, you know, at the end of the day, I guess Marika kind of touched on this. It really comes down to like starting with the curriculum. You know, what do we want to teach and how do we want to teach it? And if you can start there based on the new unified plan and make sure that that maps to how we address it from a facility standpoint, I think that's really the direction I would take on this. So just some thoughts.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you.
We also have another comment from Mr. Jeff Knowles. I want to recognize Jeff Knowles.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Again, Jeff Knowles, district parent and Willow Creek Academy board member. I am concerned, deeply concerned, that we're doing this planning before we've figured out the unification plan, essentially echoing some of the comments that have already been made. I'm also concerned that this plan has been developed without any consultation whatsoever with Willow Creek Academy, which has been living on that campus for a number of years. And while Marika is too modest to, blow her own horn, she is a professional who works on these facilities issues for a living and could add a lot of value because she went through the last master planning process as well. And again, she has not been consulted at all. These kinds of things are part of what cause a lot of concern in the district about transparency, because since there's been no public process on the key issues around unification, and the district just rolled out a plan to make that decision in the next 5 weeks, there will be a natural concern that decisions are getting made without consultation with stakeholders. So I would urge this board to do what's been advised already and step back, take a breath, engage the public, engage the stakeholders, and then do this planning.
Thank you, sir. Rome was not built in a day, so it's a process. These are conceptual drawings. The greater public is not being left out of the conversation. All right. Is there any other intent? Dr.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes, there is. Chris Durbin.
All right, Miss Chris.
Hi. Hi. Whoops. No video? Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that I do believe that we did get public input during the whole extensive unification process. So it's my understanding, just saying from my perspective, I thought we got that input, and now we have some plans put forward, and we'll see what the plan is where we go from here. That's all. We all were very involved in the unification groups. That's all.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else, sir? As you're multitasking.
I do not see any other intent to comment.
All right. Well, want to thank Mr. Lynch and Ted. Thank you so much for your time, for the renderings as we continue to do this work. You are appreciated. Feel free to hang out.
And
This will continue. Yeah, we will be hanging out.
Okay. And I just would like to say, I mean, it does sound like, having those discussions and having both sets of plans would be really helpful so that, again, people's work can be recognized and we can see where we're at. And I don't know, I keep going back to thinking about, oh my God, who, would have thought about the level of technology, and these kind of master plans that we have to do. And now we have to think about really strong technology, which is one of the challenges I think we have at the Willow Creek campus too, is, sort of infrastructure to allow really good Wi-Fi and those kinds of connections. But I just, I don't know, it's magic what you guys do. So thank you for everybody who's worked on this. And I really look forward to having that dialogue and coming up with a great plan that will work for the district. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to just say that, well, around unification, we have had a number of surveys that have had good responses. We've had a number of town hall meetings, although the facilities work group did not do as much as I'm sure they could have done. There has been a lot of opportunity for the community to be heard, and that was not by accident, it was by intent. So
thank you, Deborah. All right, folks,
I just want to add one comment. I mean, I do acknowledge that we did a lot of work around unification, but the facilities work group was kind of put on hold until we had, I think, a firmer idea of a direction for unification. So I just want to be fair to the facilities group. They were ready to go and chomping at the bit.
Right.
We just need to get through these next steps of community engagement. So.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to fold them in to this ongoing conversation, because we will continue the conversation, that is for sure. All right. I'm sorry if you can hear the horns blowing outside my apartment. I don't know what they're doing out there. They're better than the firecrackers, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'll say thank you.
That brings us to 5.01. This is the Garden Education Coordinator contract. Dr. Clark, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Wonderful.
Hey, I see you.
There you are.
So staff's recommending approval of the Garden Education Coordinator contract for 2021. You'll see that we budgeted $20,000 in the adopted 21 budget. But when the contract came in, she's asking for $1 an hour increase, which she did not receive last year. And also she has plans. This contract entails about 190 more additional hours than what she usually does, given the COVID class size cohort restrictions. So we're recommending approval to continue the garden program.
Did I read on here somewhere on her contract that she was doing field trips?
I think the idea is that they've done field trips, and I think the hope is during the school year, field trips come back.
I see.
Right.
Only 5% of the contract.
I would like to point out that also the public health operational order encourages as much outdoor learning as possible to mitigate possible spread. And so the garden program, provides an opportunity for that. That's facilitated and planned and coordinated. But there's also an opportunity, as long as you take just one sanitary cohort of kids, you could still go on a field trip.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we don't cross cohorts.
Thank you for the clarification.
And how does this fit in our prioritization of funding for kind of COVID-19 needs? And because I know a couple slides down, we've got a $200,000 deficit that we're facing for next year. So spending another $10,000 to add to that deficit starts to worry me.
Well, I mean, having a deficit is of a concern also, but I think at some point, at least what I've told some staff members is, if it's a priority, if it's a have to, then we'll have to find the money for it. The garden program has been well established at Bayside MLK, and I think the community sees it as a definite benefit, not only to the campus and the community, but also to the students and the garden education and outdoors. The work itself, she maintains the garden year round. And part of these hours are just actually the contractor working in the garden to maintain it. I think it's a valuable program for what the kids and the benefit they get from it. And I'd be willing to take that $10,000 deficit and find those funds somewhere else, or to reduce some other program to find that additional cost. There's also part of this is that this is the not to exceed price. And as the county public health restrictions ease, hopefully, at least that's the hope, then she'll come back and she'll modify the proposal and then get back to where larger groups can go to the garden at the same time. So she's not seeing so many groups over the course of the year. So it could be less. It won't be more, but it could be less as the year goes on.
And I agree.
In the past, you use up the entire $20,000 budget, because if that was a not to exceed as well.
Right.
Did you use it up?
Was there a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was saying this is kind of follow on to my last question, which is last year we had $20,000 budgeted, and was that the entirety of that amount used up for this contract?
I believe so. We still have June's bill to get. I haven't seen it yet. And those of us who've been on campus, I think she's been out there almost every day trying to get the garden ready for the summer. And actually, she's already had 2 harvests this summer to pull the greens out of the garden for the kids who are on campus.
Okay.
So
Yes,
I'm not exactly where she stands, but I know there'll be a June bill coming in.
Yeah, and I was going to follow up, Robert, by saying I think it's beneficial as well, because when it's harvested, the vegetables are then offered to the children. I've come to the school and I've seen them, harvest, and they're in the hallway there that children can take home with them. It's beneficial, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment, Deborah?
What? Oh no, I just I having seen the outdoor education programs that are at risk now, I just want to underscore what Dr. Garcia said about how important it is for our kids who are going to be cohorted all year to have an opportunity to be out. And I think I strongly support Dr. Clark's commitment to this as something in these times, most especially for nutritional reasons and just outdoor breathing time, to not let this go.
So, I agree with all the importance of outdoor education, and the Garden Project has it kind of parallels with the Conscious Kitchen program. My caution was primarily, if this is a priority of our district, that we find savings elsewhere in the budget to fund these additional costs rather than adding it to our deficit.
And that's very possible. Not to preview a little bit of the upcoming item, but given the fact that the state is very close to adopting a budget, and we get some final numbers, the budget, when I come back in August and do the 45-day revision, there may be additional revenues. Well, it's not May. There will be additional revenues coming back to the district. So the budget that we adopted will look different, or at least at the 45-day revision. And I know that further down the agenda, there's a change in the overall budget itself, but my hope is that, and I haven't done the numbers yet because this has all been very last minute, but my hope is that the change in the state budget will bring us the additional revenues we need. Also, we still don't have the actual dollar amount for the learning loss mitigation funding. That has not been settled yet, and that's a line item in the adopted budget with a zero amount. So that'll be additional revenue coming to the district as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's all greatly encouraging. I mean, I just caution because we're bumping up against our 5% reserves. So every extra 10,000 we pull out, we're getting a little bit closer to having to be under that current year reserve amount. So that was my main caution.
Other board comments?
Nope, I'm done. Oh.
I would just like to say I'm supportive of this program. And while I don't think on a stacked rank priority list, this is at the top, it's definitely a nice program. But I would also concur that, the deficit and reserves are a concern. And if there's a commitment to kind of finding the savings elsewhere, even though the specifics may not be worked out tonight, then I'd be inclined to support this, but only kind of with that commitment.
Agreed.
Josh, when you say that, could it be an increase in funding, or does it have to be a savings someplace?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the questions I was on my mind I forgot to ask is, have we sought external help? These are the kind of programs I think foundations are more apt to support than, let's say, we're short on teacher salary or something. So whether it comes from the state property taxes or even a foundation, we don't necessarily have to cut to be able to find $10,000.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Trustee Barrow. We actually had a meeting yesterday to talk about a kind of food support, gardening support, healthy eating, produce support grant. And so that conversation, that work has begun. It isn't submitted yet, which is why you haven't heard me talk about it, but we are actually absolutely working in that direction.
Good news.
Here.
Other board comments? Any intent from the public?
Yasmin McGrain would like to comment.
Yasmin.
Hi again. I just wanted to, having worked closely at both schools with the nutrition program, the garden program, and anybody else who sees how much work these folks on the ground do and their passion and commitment to what they do, and that it's not an ancillary program. It really is integrated to the curriculum at both schools. So I'm, especially that also thinking about the audience that we're serving and the time that we're serving now during COVID. Like I think one of the trustees mentioned, getting outdoors, and it's just such a relief right now for these kids that I think it's a really top priority that if we can do anything what Trustee Barrow said about raising funds or a grant or finding the money somewhere else, that would be great. They're just fantastic people that spend, extra over the mile just to get these programs to the kids. So I'm definitely in support of the garden program.
Thank you, Yasmin. Any other comments from the public? Dr. Garcia?
I see no other intent to comment, Trustee Green.
All right, folks, this is an action item, and it is
on the approval of the contract.
Second.
I'm sorry.
We add. I would be more inclined to a vote for it if we added the caveat that the funds would be either through additional revenue or reprioritizing some funding or fundraising rather than adding to our deficit budgeting.
Did you want to do that based on his comment of when he comes back in August, because we're still waiting to hear back from the state, that our budget's going to look different?
Well, we're approving it now based on what we know right now. So I would, and what we know right now is we've got a $207,000 deficit. So I'm just adding, if we add those additional provisions to the motion that I just mentioned, then I would be in support of it.
Yeah, President Green, I just want to add in, so if your additions to the motion move forward, is it a conditional approval of the MOU for the garden contractor, or does the garden contractor's MOU be approved for 2021, and your comments are really on the district to resolve how it's funded?
Correct. Yes,
okay.
The latter.
I want to make sure. I want to be able to get back to her to say, yes, please work here in 2021, or no, you need to go find another position somewhere.
And that clarifies it for me too, because I was thinking, what happens if we don't get the money? So the caveat is that we're going to work to get the money, the extra 10,000 that wasn't budgeted.
We will either get new money or we will take it out of some other.
Right.
Correct.
As Dr. Clark initially suggested he was prepared to do.
All right. So did you hear those additions, Bonnie, as you were making a motion?
I will accept the
budget.
amendment, friendly amendment to say that I would move that we approve this contract and that the district will find the difference of $10,000 in some other way, whether it's increased revenue or decreased expenditures in some manner.
So it was moved with the amendment and second. All in favor? Aye.
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 And Josh, that was an aye from you as well?
And a thumbs up.
And a thumbs up.
Thank you, sir.
Love the motion and conditions. Thank you.
Yes. All right. That brings us to 502. This is to consider approval of forming an ad hoc bond subcommittee. Dr. Garcia, would you like to give us some breath on this, please?
Yes, we've heard some extensive comment from the public and from trustees based on the presentations that we saw, both related to the bond survey and the facilities master plan. I think the groundswell of commentary that I heard is engage the community in a transparent fashion and get a significant amount of feedback before moving forward. For those reasons, I do recommend formation of the ad hoc bond committee so that there is an ad hoc committee of trustees that can provide input and guidance and responsiveness to the process.
Thank you so much for that. And I was appraised of the idea that an ad hoc bond committee, in terms of the historic content of it, apprised of those who are already on the facilities. So I don't know how you want to move forward with this, but this is the formation of an ad hoc. I know that I would like to volunteer myself to be a part of it, and I think an ad hoc is 2 people.
I'd like to volunteer as well. And just note that this is would run through August 7th.
Correct.
Which is when we would, if we were to move forward with the bond and approve it, that's when the filing would happen for the elections committee.
So unless there's some objection, since
I want to just say that it will be streamline the process for the two of you who are on the facilities committee be a part of this as well. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you, Deborah. I was just going to say, Caroline and I have been dancing so very well as of late, on this facilities.
Tango now.
You got to check your feet. How bruised are your feet? Anyway.
I agree that the continuity makes sense here. For the record, I would have always volunteered for this kind of.
Can I just ask a question? Yeah.
Whether it's facilities or bond, but it's well underway, so I'm not going to try to get in the way of this one.
There's going to be plenty of meetings, Josh, where
believe me.
I'm sure you can go.
And you can always change to the policy committee anytime you want. I will happily turn that seat over to you.
Duly noted, as Ida likes to say.
That's right. Bonnie.
I am thankful I'm delighted. I think it's a great idea. I am not volunteering to be on it. And my question is, because with the ad hoc committee, is it possible to have outside people, or is it more that you're the committee and then you incorporate a whole bunch of feedback from the community? You have been through this in the past. I'm not sure how this works. So.
Yeah, I think my experience with this in the past bond election was it just was the 2 board members, and we were kind of the facilitators to coordinate a lot of the community meetings. We'd participate in all of the community meetings. We're kind of like a hub of information gathering for both the community and the board in facilitating this process through to the August 7th date.
And of course, bringing that back to the board, Bonnie, as she has said. And so I hope people are, ready to not go on vacation.
Yeah, I just want to add that, this would incorporate, as many people have said, this needs to parallel the work of the unification process.
Absolutely.
So it would be coordinating likely with unification committees and or task force, as well as the work groups and the town halls and all the things coming up. Yep.
That's great.
Well, and the beauty is we're using this virtual platform. So it's very possible that you can chime in to wherever it is that you are at. I don't believe that we are in a space as of yet to come into any facility, to have discussions. I could be wrong, but those numbers continue to tick up for the virus, and I can't see us being in any auditorium.
Nope.
I think that's definitely right for the fall and potentially for most of the 2021 school year. We are looking very likely to need to operate the sanitary cohorts alone out in outdoor play spaces, or alone in spaces like multi-purpose rooms if it's raining. But we are not looking at a large-scale mixing of children in a cafeteria setting or an assembly setting or out on the playground anytime soon.
Or adults for that matter.
Or adults for that matter, yeah.
Yes. I also think, this type of work moving forward may lend itself to the suggestion that Jen Conway brought up earlier, and, so that you're able, technology is a wonderful thing, and to be able to reach out to the masses in different ways. I think we have to utilize those ideas, to really start, so people without excuse. Dr. Garcia, I think you had said when you first came onto the district, onto this position, communication through so many different mechanisms, and I know I hope that the school is going to do that. Apps, Twitter, Facebook, all these different platforms. I think we'll have an opportunity, to do the same in terms of putting the information out there. So we can put it out there. It's going to be up to the people to come. We should be in a space where we can say that we did everything in our ability to get the message out. It's the people need to respond to it.
I am pleased to say we are active on all those platforms when we were not a year ago, and we're just going to firm up a communication, and we'll definitely saturate all of those media along with email and text and robocalls, and we invite all of the engaged members of the public here. I'll share it with the Sausalito Library, so it goes out to that listserv. I'll share it with the Marin City Free Library, so it goes out to that listserv. We'll share it with the Housing Authority, so it goes out to that listserv. We generally do all these things, but I want to encourage everybody that's listening to also help us spread the word. Whether it's reposting on your own social media or posting on Nextdoor or whatever the case might be. Every retweet, every reshare, it all helps us spread the message amongst our community, and we appreciate all of your support in doing just that.
Thank you, Shar. Are there other board comments? Any intent from the public, sir?
I see no raised hands.
This is an action item.
I move that we form an ad hoc bond subcommittee with the two board members being President Green and Trustee Van Olst.
It's been moved.
I'll second the motion.
Moved in second. All in favor?
I think it's a roll call.
It is no.
Really? Why?
Is it a resolution?
It's not a resolution.
It's not a resolution.
My apologies.
No worries.
And just for specificity, can we add to the resolution that this expires on August the 7th?
Can you add to
Okay,
the
I would amend my
motion?
motion to say that we're approving this ad hoc bond subcommittee with its expiration date of August 7th.
Thank you.
And I'll second that amendment.
And this is not roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? All right. Thank you so much, folks. We're going to move along to 5.03. This is consider approval of the memorandum of understanding between Marin Head Start in Sausalito Marin City School District. Dr. Clark.
Hi, this is a little after the fact. Our apologies, it got away from us. This is the approval of the MOU for this summer's Summer Bridge program, which is partnering with the Marin Head Start program. It's included in the 1920 budget, and it's estimated at about $15,000. So staff recommends approval.
This is a district share?
Yes, this is our portion.
No comments?
No comment.
Deborah.
No
Josh.
comment. Sorry, no comment.
Did we lose Josh? He is in the mountains.
It does look like he may have.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I heard his vote on the last
Yeah, I didn't either.
topic either, so maybe you want to wait for him to come back.
We can do that. And in the meantime, Dr. Garcia, can you let us know what the Bridge program is for those who may not be aware?
Yes, the Summer Bridge program provides an opportunity for students that are pre-K or TK rising into kindergarten to come for a 5-week summer program, get acclimated to a classroom at the big school, and to get some support in transitioning in both academic and social emotional content. We do have 11 little kiddos that are enrolled and coming, and that's being staffed internally because it is a preschool age program. We were able to staff that with CSEA staff. So we're really thankful for the teachers that are working there and allowing it to happen. It is following all the same social distancing and health protocols as all other summer programming. There's staggered arrival and dismissal, so that group of students isn't arriving at the same time as any other group of students. There's a health check to start the day, complete with temperature screenings and a health questionnaire. Even though they're littles, we still ask them. And so we do find both an academic and a social emotional learning benefit for students participating in the Summer Bridge program. And I would just double down on Dr. Clark's recommendation to approve. I do not see Trustee Barrow back on yet.
Who's on the iPad trying to get on?
I have dialed in, lost
Okay.
my internet temporarily, but I'm here on the phone now.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we may have missed your vote on the ad hoc bond subcommittee.
Yes, I was not connected. I would have voted yes.
Okay.
But if you missed me, you missed me.
We missed you. So Josh, we are now on 5.03. This is consider approval of a MOU between Marin Head Start and the district. And Dr. Clark was letting us know that this has come to us just a tad bit late because the program has already begun. And Dr. Garcia was just explaining what the program is. I think you're familiar with the Summer Bridge program, and that is getting transitional kindergarten children acclimated with the big school, if you will.
Mhm.
And so the $15,000 is a district's portion for this program.
And they're
And it is budgeted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Previously budgeted.
Yes.
Okay.
You there, Josh?
I am.
Yeah.
I motion to approve when you guys are ready.
All right. Is there any intent, Dr. Garcia, from the public?
I see no raised hands, President Green.
Thank you so much, sir. This is an action item. Need a motion to approve.
Josh made a motion. I'll second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much. All right. This
you.
brings us to 5.04. This is consider approval to increase the 2020-2021 in lieu payment to Willow Creek Academy. Dr. Clark.
Yes. So it's a little misleading, but it was the title and the write-up, and the fact that it's not necessarily up for discussion or approval of board action to change the in lieu amount now that the state has, at least the governor and the legislature have come to an agreement. They are, I think the estimated schedule timeline is for the legislature to take action tomorrow and the governor to sign either Friday or Monday. He has until June 30 but they do agree about the changes to the bigger changes to the state budget. That includes removing the 10% reduction and then the removal of the 2.31% COLA. And those changes will impact the in lieu calculation for Willow Creek. So I was asked yesterday to bring forward a document today just to show the impact of those changes. And so, Steve, if you will let me share. Thanks. I'm going to, there's two documents. There's a document that's attached to this board agenda item, and that's a PowerPoint. And it's one of those things that, you know, when you're rushing to get something done, you have an idea in your head and you move forward on it. And then today, when I had a moment to reflect and spend a little bit of time, I could have just created a simple spreadsheet, which would have been probably a lot cleaner and simpler for the community to understand. So I apologize to the board. This is the first time you're seeing this, and to the community also, but it's the same information. It's the same information in the PowerPoint presentation that's attached. It's just now in one single document. So just to go through it with you, and on June 18th, when the board did adopted the 2021 budget, the statutory in lieu amount was based on Willow Creek's ADA for the 2021 school year, which was an ADA of 334. That gave them $2.5 million of the statutory in lieu. Per the settlement agreement, they were locked in at the ADA rate of 356. So in the budget for the budget adoption, we had the statutory in lieu, we had an add-on amount, and then the 2.671 number is what was budgeted. And that was the total in lieu payment going to Willow Creek, the statutory in lieu plus the add-on. Fast forward a week, which I think I may have commented a couple of times when we had the board meeting on the 25th, that given the fact that there wasn't a state budget and things were changing, we knew that things were going to change and come back. And so in the last couple of days with the legislature and the governor making agreements and putting more information out, I was asked to bring back today what it would look like. So now, given the fact that the governor and the legislature have agreed, though nothing has been acted and signed upon, and so we're still waiting for that official, for that official action. But they've agreed to remove the COLA and also the 10% reduction. Oops, typo. And so if we stay with the settlement agreement for the in lieu calculation, the ADA is 356. The in lieu now statutory amount is $2.9 million. So the change to the statutory amount from what was adopted, the statutory amount, not the total amount, but the statutory amount of 2.5 is now changed to 2.9. So it's a difference of $390,000. Since we as a district had budgeted 2.6, it's only a net change to us of $229,000. That's a change to us. So if we go down and you can see now the 21-20 budget, 21-21 budget, in lieu calculations are, sorry, in lieu payments are a negative. And so it impacts the revenue, the expenditures, the total expenditures, and the reserve calculation. So what you see is the in lieu change. That's the difference of what the statutory amount was at adopted and the statutory amount now. So that's going to be the in lieu change to the actual overall budget itself. To get down to what you see as this net effect here of 229, we remove the expense, which was the $160,000, which was the add-on. So those two together give you that $229,000 net. So then if we go down into the total revenues and total expenditures, because you'll see that they changed. This was what was adopted in June, on June 18th. Oh, sorry, on June 18th. Oops. And then this would be what the adjusted revenues will be at if the state takes action, everything stays the same. And then yet there's also the other change of no 10% reduction That means the basic aid supplemental money comes back, the ACES money comes back, the minimum state aid money comes back. So those are additional revenues that'll be coming back to us as a district as well. I do not have those numbers factored in this at all. This is just the Willow Creek in lieu amount. So at the 45-day revision, we'll bring that forward. And then so you'll have a different expenditure because we've removed $160,000 as well. So moving on down a little bit more, you get a new estimated ending balance. This is just the impact of the in lieu calculation. There's the reserves and the set-asides and commitments made. There's the 5%. And our 5% reserve changes as well because the overall expenditures are different as well. So those have changed from what they originally were. They've gone down by $160,000. So our actual reserve level, if the board recalls, we adopted the reserve level in June was 5.41, and now this is just based on the in lieu amount itself. Sorry, 5.29. The actual reserve now is just at 5.9%. There's a little bit more room in the ending reserves, and this is just the impact of the in lieu amount. So,
yay!
As I said, it's an action item, but it's not really an action item because pending the state action, it's the calculation we would do. It's what Willow Creek is owed as in charter school and their in lieu calculation.
Can I ask you a question, Dr. Clark? From the standpoint of Willow Creek putting together its budget, does this have an impact on that?
No doubt. And I know Jim Henry and I were going today on a couple of topics. And one of the things I know is I think, if memory serves, they're taking action on their budget either this weekend or Monday.
But didn't I read that they can extend that their deadline for the budget submission? I thought in something from CSBA or the state recently that given all of this switching around that their deadline has been extended.
As a charter school?
Yeah. No.
I don't know that to be true. I know that we as a traditional school district did not get the option to extend out. We were required to submit documents to the county, to the state. But it will make a difference to them. I mean, they've definitely increased their, couple $100,000 worth of revenue coming into their budget.
So even though it's not finalized for us, they can count on it.
Well, it would be one of those things that, like, for example, we had the governor's May revise with the retirement rates for STRS and PERS. That they've both agreed on that as well. So that's just short of taking a vote and the governor signing the bill, and we will be able to count on that. Those are the figures that we used to do the budget adoption. We took those reduced PERS and STRS rates. So if I was the charter school, I would, the budget's already been planned and it's being published and it's out, but I would look forward to another couple $100,000 worth of in lieu. If I was in their position, I would probably start to count on that. Yes.
So I have a question for you as well, Dr. Clark, on those lines, because we've had so many meetings. I can't keep up with the last meeting that we had, but it would have been the charter was at a deficit of over $200-something thousand. And this is like this moving forward, that there would no longer be that deficit. That when we were talking about that, I think a couple weeks ago, as to there would be over 200,000 coming out of their budget that they could not count on in their budget.
You're talking about the $196,000 set aside.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yes.
Yes. So when we were doing our budget adoption, and we were using the current governor's May revise of the COLA with the 10% reduction, which is a 2% proration factor. and at their settlement ADA, they were going to get 2.6 million, 2.671. They were going to get, I think I have it up here. So they were going to get this amount. That was going to be the amount that they were going to get. That was their.
See.
Well, now with the elimination of the COLA and the elimination of the 10% reduction, and we redo the math at their ADA rate of 356, that's the change to them. So they're going to, that's the net change to their budget.
Okay.
That 296 and the 229 is the elimination of the COLA.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The difference between the 296 set aside and the 229 is the elimination of COLA from the state.
Yes. Right, correct.
So Dr. Clark, you're saying that this is really not an action item. Why is it before us as an action item?
Error. I was asked to bring it back and assumed it was an action to take action on the change. It wasn't about giving the set aside. So I'm sorry, when we posted yesterday, I left it at action. It should have been more of an information item.
Information, yeah.
So we could just table it as an action.
Yeah.
Good.
So it's to inform the board that, there's going to be to our budget. I will say that to speak earlier, and luckily I have, a few more weeks to put stuff together. And some the month of July is going to be taking all the bits and pieces that now, once the state actually signs and takes action and the governor signs, we'll be able to bring those real numbers back of what the final impact will be. And so, the change in the in lieu amount, minimum state aid, all those other changes in the budget that we made, now that they've been reversed or taken out, we'll see where those final numbers are. And hopefully, knock on wood, we'll have the learning loss mitigation money, at least that calculation, and we'll know exactly what we're working with.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
like all the additional pots of money, like the special ed and ACES money coming back, and
right.
Like especially the special ed. We anticipate some funding from that.
Not really, because special ed didn't get the COLA.
Yeah.
And so you can't take away a COLA that you never gave. And the changes to the special ed, we're, as a county, we already exceed the per pupil amount. So we'll get very little new funding in special ed for 20.
Will Willow Creek, or are they based off of our numbers?
I don't know. I don't know that answer. I'm sorry.
They're based off of your numbers, Caroline.
Oh, thank you, Tarina.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
You're handy to have around.
Like a voice from above.
Bonnie, did you have a comment?
No, I think it's good news. So,
yeah,
it is good news. So I don't want to move ahead without other comments, even though we're going to table this as an action item. Is Josh, are you still with us? Are you good?
I am still here. Had a little trouble following on the phone with references to this and that, but so I have a clarifying question, I guess. The difference between the funding we anticipated giving Willow Creek at the time of the settlement agreement and the calculations as you run them today, can you quantify that?
Yeah, it's $230,000.
Even after this adjustment?
No.
Wait, with what? Yes, that's the additional revenue coming into Willow Creek after.
I think what Josh is asking is how short are we from the original?
How short are we? I'm sorry, I heard that the wrong way.
Yeah. Isn't that right? I mean, but isn't it?
Well, I don't know.
Isn't
I don't know if we're short right at it or have gone over the other way. I'm trying to just understand the difference.
So this is a really rough, very rough general fund, and you'll see that we have a deficit of $240,000. That's just the impact of the in lieu. It's not any changes to any revenues coming in or any revenues coming back, I should say.
I think Josh's question was at the settlement agreement, we had dollar amounts that were contemplated going to Willow Creek for the in lieu plus settlement amounts with the settlement agreement, and how different is that from where we are now?
Yeah, if I may, I think what Josh is asking is, can you tell us when we settled how much we thought they were going to get X dollar amount, and how does that compare to the X dollar amount that they're now going to receive?
Perfect.
I can't tell you that right now.
Oh, no.
Go back and pull their settlement, because it was based on the, oh, wait.
It should be the same amount.
I thought it was what we asked you to set aside. I may be mistaken.
Well, that's the 296,000. That's what we set aside. Right.
And how much are we modifying now? Is it 196 is what I heard?
No.
229.
Yeah.
229. So it's about 70,000 apart, if I follow correctly.
Right. It's the, to Caroline's point earlier, it's the cost of.
It's what?
It's the cost of not having the COLA.
Right. That's what they knew all along. Right.
Okay. To me, that's kind of what this boils down to in terms of the whole discussion around allocation versus set aside versus, kind of consuming the money. So if this budget holds, we approximately have a $70,000 decision instead of a $300,000 decision as it relates to the set aside instruction.
67,000 to be, yeah.
Is that a reasonable summary?
Yes, because when we did the budget itself, the set aside calculation of their ADA was 2.968 million. And then what we've landed for now is 2.9 million. So it's roughly $68,000 difference.
Thank you.
Can I ask Dr. Clark that the way this was addressed when we gave you our set aside instructions, it was considered a windfall to the district. Is the bypass of the COLA could you characterize that as a windfall to the district? I think not.
No, if now that at least in the agreement at the state that they're going to eliminate the COLA, think we don't have a 10% cut, but the fact that the 2.31% COLA has been eliminated, then the would have seen that COLA, we don't get that money either.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other board discussion?
I'm assuming the way this is agendized, we're not able to revisit the set aside decision, and we're not taking action on anything. So based on that, I don't think I have any more questions.
That was brought up to as we're set aside this action.
Dr. Clark, what day is the 45-day budget due?
I think I think the voice from above, Tarina, will step in on this one. I think it's 45 days from when the governor signs the budget.
Okay.
Sorry, Robert, I didn't hear the question.
Trustee Hoff was asking about what's the date for the 45-day revision, and I think it's 45 days from when the governor signs.
That's correct.
Because it seems to me that it sounds like there's a lot that has to be sorted out also between now and then in terms of what all the other budget implications are.
Right.
Okay.
And then, so I think our first board meeting in August, our first regular meeting in August, hopefully will fall within that. It's not that we'll have to have a special board meeting for it. We'll just do that.
Special board meeting? This board? No.
Why not?
Bonnie's getting punchy.
Why not?
Yeah.
So, Dr. Clark, thank you so much for this presentation. Don't go anywhere, because we are going to set aside the action but just to open it up to the public if there are any comments, keeping in mind that we're setting aside this action.
Tabling it, yes.
Or tabling this recommendation.
Yes.
To take action.
Do we have to take action?
There is an intent from Mr. Kurt Weinheimer. Want to recognize Kurt Weinheimer.
All right, wonderful. So, sir, do you still need to share your screen?
Yeah, I can stop, sure.
Thank you, sir. All right, Kurt, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
It's only been about a week or so.
I know. I got to stop meeting like this.
Let's.
Yeah,
Go ahead, sir.
I had a couple questions on this. So, one is right now we're looking, as you mentioned, we're looking at about a $2.6 million from the district. This would move it up to $2.9 million from the district. We, as you noted, we've got to vote on a budget on Sunday. We really would appreciate guidance because $300,000 for us means, as you know, pretty deep cuts off our budget. So guidance for that would be really, really helpful because we need to vote on a balanced budget. So we need to understand, should we be including this or not including this? And given that the funding doesn't come from the state, it comes from local, it's your money, right? So you decide if we get the money or don't get the money. It would just be helpful. I'm not sure why you aren't voting just to say, let's provide this money to the students at Willow Creek. Because even if it is, it'd be $2.9 million for 356 students or so. So that's about $8,100 per student that the district's going to be providing to students at Willow Creek. And I'm not sure, I think you said that the district's budget then outside of that is what, $7.4 million? And so you'll have about $7.4 million to provide for 117 students at Bayside MLK and your overhead. And you'd be providing $2.9 million for 356 students at Willow Creek. And as you know, that's most of the kids in Marin City and most of the kids in Sausalito. So just trying to understand why A, you didn't vote to do this before and why you wouldn't vote now. It would really alleviate a lot of uncertainty for most of the families in the community. So we'd love to understand A, if my numbers are correct, and then B, why you wouldn't vote to do this. I'm not sure why you didn't do it in the original budget. So thank you.
Dr. Garcia, Dr. Clark, who would like to address that question?
I think we both will. I think that it's, from my understanding of Dr. Clark's presentation, and Dr. Clark, correct me if I'm wrong, the guidance is to count on the 2.9 number and not the 2.6 number. And my understanding of the reason of Dr. Clark's recommendation not to take an action is because that is going to be the formula set by the state. So it's not necessarily an action for the board to take per se. That will be the formula. But we wanted actually to bring the item before the board tonight, actually for the purpose of providing some of the surety that you're asking for. I don't know, Dr. Clark, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, that's exactly right. It's the state calculation for the FCMAT calculator based on the our property taxes, Willow Creek's enrollment, and the 356 ADA for the settlement. Willow Creek's entitled to $2.9 million worth of in lieu. So that's the calculation. The board doesn't take action or approve that in lieu amount from that calculator. So Kurt, for you guys with your budget, if I was in your place, I would definitely count the 2.9. We're counting on the district adopted budget. We counted on the governor's budget. We're making changes based on what we know is coming out of the state, the legislature right now. So for you guys coming up with a budget, I would count on the 2.9 in lieu calculation.
Do you have a comment, Josh?
I do. I think there was another part to Kurt's question, and I'd like to do my best to answer it. I think in the last 2 meetings, at least, when the budget was agendized, the discussion of taking a vote on using our discretion to allocate that money, despite the uncertainty at the government, at the state level on the budget, was definitely talked about at length, and was landed on, instead of allocating it, to set it aside. And so, there were various reasons spoken about as to why, including COVID uncertainty and so forth. And, each time, while I personally objected, those were the reasons given. And the money was set aside in some fashion. I thought, looking at the agenda tonight, we might be making a final decision on that, given there was some clarity coming out of the state. But my understanding is, based on the way it's agendized, we're not really set up to make a final decision. But that was the root of my question earlier is, well, assuming this budget stands, how much delta is there in the set aside, or what we were trying to decide? And it sounds like 68,000. So my expectation is that you have the guidance that you can use that money to the extent that this budget will hold, and that's what we're all planning around right now, and that sometime, hopefully in the near future, we will make a decision on the remainder of the set aside, the 68,000, presumably informed by how COVID and unification and other things roll out. Hopefully I did a fair summary for the board. That's my understanding.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think he said that it went from 2.6 to 2.9 million, and at this stage right now, that is what the charter schools should count on in terms of acting on their budgetary discussions. Unfortunately, on Sunday. I mean, Sunday should be an off day. Sunday should be a day of rest. You guys are having a board meeting. Yes, Dr. Garcia, did you? Oh, okay.
No, I don't have any further comment or offering. I just wanted to reiterate, the intent to bring the item back was indeed to provide some surety. I apologize for any confusion around agendizing it as an action item. I think Trustee Barrow did a really good job in summarizing kind of procedurally what happened and where we are and where we're trying to go. But it is our intent to provide that surety for budgeting purposes. We know that there are some big decisions coming up, and I think I would also say, and I, this is my own interpretation. I'm not trying to lead anybody, but my understanding of the intent of the board on the set aside was to set aside the full amount. And once we had surety from the state about what the budgetary conditions would actually finally be, provided that we had room and we were able to do that, was to allocate the full amount. And so I would expect that would be the direction that we would take in the not too distant future, once the budget action is finalized by the governor and the legislature.
Are they really close now? I've been reading, and are they close? Do you know, Dr. Clark?
Yeah, we had the county did a presentation today, and the legislature is supposed to take action tomorrow, and the governor should sign either tomorrow or Monday.
That's close.
So we might be clicking glasses pretty soon in celebration. Bonnie, did you have a comment?
No, thank you.
More board discussion before we table this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask procedurally, is tabling it the right thing to do? It always.
I just want to.
Huh? What?
I don't know. I mean, I think what we're saying is this is what the statute is, but I don't know.
I'll move or remove it as an action item from the agenda.
I would second that. That sounds like the way to do it. Yeah.
Okay. You get the money, Kurt.
Well, next time, when we know better, we do better. So next time it'll come back as information. It's been a great discussion, however. So,
Do we have to vote on that motion?
really?
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
second the motion to table then.
No, to remove it.
Well, remove it as an action item. We're not
Who's
going
done first?
So sorry to remove it.
You
It
are.
was, yeah, it was erroneously included as an action item.
It is being moved to remove this item 5.04 as an action item by Bonnie.
Okay.
Did I get that right?
I moved. You seconded.
Caroline moved.
Good. I second it. I'll
All
third.
right.
Deborah first seconded it. And then Bonnie
Moved and seconded.
it.
All in favor. All in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
You know what, folks? I always tear up when we get to this part of the agenda. I don't know why it is. I just do. Here we are, 6.01.
You got to take your glasses out so we can see your tears. Come on.
Josh, did you want to vote against it?
Need to move to adjourn.
Sure, but I already voted for it, so. It doesn't
Okay.
We swept you in the wave.
I'm going to join Josh for some rabbit because I know Josh either got deer or rabbit for dinner tonight. So let's adjourn this meeting so I can get going.
Okay. Who moved?
Thank you, folks.
Second.
Caroline has moved and Bonnie has second. We are adjourning this meeting at 8:24 p.m. Thank you, folks. Drive